Wellness family. This is Sevan from Costa Rica. It is for sure another exciting evening to be here in the Space with Tribe in this co-creation. Wow. It is full moon, or at least pretty close to it, so the energy is really high. It's interesting to really dial in because there's so many energies coming from so many different spaces. I really just had to take a moment today, to really seek clarity on even my last 72 hours and where the higher self, the consciousness, the cosmos, whoever's taking the page really needs me to be and needs me to do right now with all things considered. I believe that, when you have any level of intelligence and you see what is happening in the world today, you really want to find some solutions and come to a point where you're even settled yourself with understanding what is ultimately the potential of what can happen here. I've been watching so many sanctums of people who have a voice. It seems like at this point, because there are so many voices, maybe we can't even really hear each other anymore. And it's just like you watch conversations that take place for hours and then end with no real solutions being deployed. And while that could be, sometimes it can't be all the time. So tonight is really dedicated to that force of consciousness that is just coming here to figure out the answer to how they can get into a better space than the dualistic, conniving, karmic, deceptive aspects of this plane. And so I feel like that we owe it to the cosmos to do this at least once. In fact, I plan to launch another series here that is just going to be based on the Gitas in 2021, because I personally feel with the plethora of spiritual knowledge that is available, it does make, in many cases, a lot of these works look questionable, meaning that the knowledge to gaining not only a higher aspect of consciousness with yourself and real introspection with the Supreme, etc., has already been delivered to this planet. It's not something that we're waiting on someone to come and do. And that, to me, is a little bit more concerning than if it wasn't here yet. And this is because with this knowledge laying around and there not really being large efforts to bring this knowledge to the people to end their suffering, we realize that on this plane, as you're going to see today, that a battle has already taken place, and the victor is not necessarily in the best. It's not the best of our interest to have that kind of being reigning over us. Now, I'm talking about a battle that takes place within, and because many have lost that battle within, it also pervades without, or on the outside of everything that we're dealing with internally. So it ran amok already inside, as I'm going to show, and then now it's expressing itself in the external world, and this is all a part of the process. And in this process, you have to gain a certain level of confidence in yourself and surety that the moves that you're going to make are going to give you the results that you're looking for. And you're going to be so sure about that, even sometimes when it gets tough to maintain that, you're going to still be able to go forward. It's going to be almost like nothing. Sometimes you could get into a situation that's so crazy. After you get out of that situation, it puts you in a position to really deal with anything, almost the petty stuff, unless you start getting soft again. And meaning that if nothing is happening that keeps you on your toes, it seems like sometimes you may fall asleep. So it's important for us to do our own maintenance and not really let the cosmos come or what even is the light come and check your DNA, meaning that there are things that are latent and dormant within our DNA. There's karmas that we've already worked out. All of this still is held account every single day in our actions and in where our consciousness is moving. And so what we want to always do is we want to always be in a position where we're seeing greater things. Like if you look at, well, don't look at just the news. There's no good news. Like it's wild now. It's like there's not one morsel of good news. I think, at least 10 years ago, they would come in and a North Carolina lady found $400 on the street. There was something they would throw in there that just would be like, oh, well, great for that person. Nowadays, they got the them composers that be making them tracks for Terminator and Transformers. They might as well have that kind of music playing with the news now, because it's like, but again, that's what's happening around us. And I really want to make sure that everyone is in a position to realize today and to begin the process of knowing that that's not something that they have to tolerate in their experience at all. And we're going to talk about the transition between this world and the next, and how it's done right or balanced, if you may, and how it's done not the way that you want to do it. And maybe you're just not aware of that. So today is going to be a maximum wisdom day. Also, I want to ask a question very quickly here. It's in a poll. And I'm launching this poll now, and it says, who is here? It's a simple question, but I just need to make sure before we touch and agree that there's some level of confirmation here. Who is here to expand beyond the framework of this world? And what I mean by this, just so it's very clear, just so nobody thinks I'm bagging on nature or anything, I'm just talking about, like, right now, every time you're hearing something again on the news stations and, friends talking about what's to come and the whole thing with money and all this kind of stuff, it's like, man, come on. It's like, y'all got rid of Trump to start up some new stuff again. Y'all ain't got a break. I mean, this is obviously not going to end. And, we're over here like just naive, like, don't worry, consciousness is already eventually. There's already spaces that exist without this going on. And make no mistake, there's a plan to prepare you to enter into that space, but it's for sure going to need your assistance. It's going to need your agreements to be able to say, okay, I'm in agreement with this. I'm ready to expand. I got enough here. And so that's what we're going to be building into tonight. So it looks like that, we hit 100%. Actually, we hit over 100%. It blew out the framework. So it looks like that there shouldn't be, there's no no's. I'll say it that way. So we have 80% of the group today who has answered, is up to 83% now. And I'm assuming anybody else is just not able to get their fingers over to that vote button. But by popular majority, then we got to do this tonight. We have to take a moment, and I have to really open up to you and let you understand what's going on, understand what moves you need to make, and do my best to let you see the fine line between the mind and what you could say is your spirit or soul. At this point, also, I can no longer assist in distinguishing between the soul and the spirit. This has been somewhat of a contention point for me over the last 3 weeks, especially with vernacular and etymology. But at this stage, we're seeing that the unification between the spirit and the soul is so entwined, you can't even recognize one from the other. But it's clear that the spirit fuels itself from the mind and fuels itself from the memories and the actions of the body. So what we're talking about tonight is total union, the real thing happening inside of you. I also wanted to say there is a disclaimer on tonight's build. And this is just something I want to make sure that I get out before we even start. And that's, when you walk away from tonight, try not to let only your mind tell you, I know what he's talking about. We got this. I know what to do. and then bring this calm over things that's not accompanied with any actual actions. Okay? Because when I'm able to now isolate even within my mind is how it goes through this process of, my mind is so powerful at this stage, it almost can create the spiritual reality or the spiritual experience. So I have to be very, very cautious, and I have to be very, very aware when my mind is now, expressing and even pulling strings to make me feel like I'm reaching a stage of spiritual connection and union and perpetual happiness and all this kind of stuff. And when really the soul and the spirit is still in need of quite a bit of nourishment work and things that were already laid out that we should be doing in order to get the spirit strong enough to really make the journey that the mind is convinced that it's going to make already. And why the mind has to stay comfortable. It's like every time a problem is introduced, the mind needs to come up with a solution. And it doesn't even care anymore, especially if that solution is even real. It just wants to put a Band-Aid over whatever the problem is. Like, it's all going to work out. Don't worry, the cosmos. When really there's a real way to deal with situations that you either are experiencing or you may be experiencing in the future. There's a way to shore yourself up right now from anything that is to come. So I wanted to take the moment, since we did get an opportunity to confirm with 88% of the people that are in the room tonight that there's an interest to expand beyond the framework of what we're seeing going on right now with the shirts in the closet and the chairs at the table and the refrigerator and the cars and the money and all of the rest of these things that are coming into the space all the time and giving us yet more things to not just be distracted by, but in a certain sense be clouded by from the truth of the matter of what we need to be doing. So I want to let everyone know that is just joining tonight that you are here for a very, very special reason. It's not a game at all. Like, this is very, very serious. Like, something's up, something's happening. And we've just had this opportunity, this life, to maintain our consciousness enough to make sure that we're attracting the spaces that are going to take us to where we need to go. Something's happened. Your grandma maybe was praying. Your great-great-grandmother is on the other side still looking at you. There's some transmissions that are happening and they're pinging off of you. Something is going on where it's putting you in a position to actually be able to know what's going on in one of the wildest times in existence that I can recall personally. And so this time in this space that we're opening up now is awareness that we are infinite. The symbol that you're seeing right now, these two hands being raised, is a symbol of infinite existence or everlasting life by our ancestors. And so we always take a moment to touch and agree. That means when you're touching my hands and I'm touching your hands, we're all touching hands. And what this does is it creates a space in infinity that allows us to, whenever we're experiencing something negative or whenever we're in need of glory, honor, power, riches, abundance, all the different things that we know that we prefer, that we could tap into this inexhaustible wellspring, this full spectrum that activates perpetual energy, and we can begin to create the formations of things that allow us to be able to conceive that. Now, there are a few more of these. This is not the only one. And we welcome anyone here that, if you do, again, feel like that you need to get an extra level of connection, to make sure that you remember this space. And with that being said, I would like us all to just take a brief moment to take 5 breaths, 6 breaths. We'll say 6 breaths to restore yourself into you, just to feel yourself. Because even right now when I'm talking, your brain's got to listen to what I'm saying. Then it's got to interpret it to you. Now, there's a great power in having a mentor, but most of that power is actually shown even when that mentor is actually in the physical, more so than this, this digital that we've inherited, right? Just real talk. So you have to do the extra in making sure that you be mindful of getting the connection wired right. So I'm saying, once again, if we were in the same room together and, we were going into an action or activity, or I was even explaining something, it would be easy for you to absorb while still feeling who I am. But because we are using this form of communication, it really does take some intention for a moment for you to say, okay, let me feel my body. Let me feel myself inside of my consciousness, not projecting through a screen or a TV that I'm looking at, but right here within myself. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take these 5 breaths. We're going to take in 1 deep breath now, and you're going to hold it, and then you're going to let it go. And you're going to feel your body. You're going to take another deep breath and hold it, and then let it go. Bring yourself into your body. Take another deep breath. Hold, and then let it go. Another deep breath. And let it go. Let's do that again. And let it go. We're just going to take this moment to bring ourselves into this space to just receive this transmission, because it's so important. Like, what's been happening around all of the teachers and all the instructors is that the wellspring of knowledge and duty has began to just submerge time. It just seems to not be enough time. Like, you're just getting some stuff done. You're just getting the first page of the book. The sun's already going down. It's time to go to sleep. You need to get to sleep because, you got to be on point, but you may be running thin. You're like 5-6 hours worth of sleep. You're still trying to absorb, get more knowledge, learn more about yourself. And it's just like, there's some things that you're going to need to know. There's going to be some wisdom that you need to have. That's really the power of the mentors, is that they can just impart wisdom on you. And it's like, it's up to you after having that wisdom to go into the action so that you can begin to experience what that wisdom offers, because even the wisdom is a bit dangerous. And it's because of the mind. The mind can take wisdom and start thinking that it knows what everybody's talking about and has figured it out. And this directly then snatches the food, if you may, or the next revelation from the spirit, which now needs to actually work out the actions to bring that potential. So I want to start off by saying, and I'm going to stop the poll here. We did get up to 91%. I want to first start off with, when I had reached this ascended stage, and I knew that it was time to come down again, that you had to come down. So when I went up, it was like I anticipated staying up indefinitely. And then I got the memo, I got the knowledge, I got the wisdom and the awareness that I had to actually go back down, that I needed to basically make another descent into what we would call the world or the prima materia, and go as low as possible. And then that way, when we make the ascent back up, that we would take as many of us as we could. So it's like a spoon. You're just going to try to dig as deep as you can, and then as deep as you can go. And then finally, you're going to make that turn, And then you're going to come back up, and everything that catches, it's like a net. Everything that catches is going to bring it back up. So this is also why a lot of us have been still concerned, again, about family members and other people that we know, and we're trying to get them awake, and we're submerging ourselves into rather interesting situations in order to get that message transmitted to them. As I explained in an earlier recording, I call that dredging. It's like when you see the big machines that, they dig deep dredgers, and they pull up all of the sediments and everything that are down deep. So the descent really requires that you attempt to go as low as possible. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, so how do I know when I've hit as low as I can go, or the bottom, basically, so I can start making my turnaround and go back up? So I got the answer to that question about 2 days ago when I jumped into a chat in the Clubhouse, and through a series of events, I was basically being talked to in a way that I haven't been talked to in a long time. And for me, it was a bit humiliating. The person never took a moment to know who I was. It was not like it even mattered, though. Because for me, everybody is the same until you actually prove yourself to be different. Everything is the truth until I prove it a lie. I'm just really good at proving lies. Meaning I'd start everybody off on the same frequency, the frequency that I'm on. And then I let their harmonics determine where we're going and how we're traveling. But there's always a respect. So I was not afforded that respect. I excused myself from that space, but I can't say that I wasn't vexed from the situation in some way, shape, or form. It was comical for me for a moment while the whole thing was taking place, because it felt like something was amiss. So I literally was like, well, let's let the process, run its course. But again, it wasn't something that was on my mind. So being in number 4, this is still not going to last but for a few more hours, meaning that 4s have this ability to, like, in a day and a half, it's pretty much over anyway. So I had almost reached my day and a half point, and it came up into my consciousness again, and I submitted it, if you may, to the query machine, the thing that I asked that gives answers to any question that I can present. Why did this happen? And they said, well, how do you feel? If you could come up with a word. And I said, really kind of humiliated. And it said, humiliated or humility? And then I got it. See, what's happening is that there's a way when we're external that we see things and we interpret those things. That would have been humiliated. But then there's another way internally where there's a pattern happening. And in that pattern, there's an initiation into something else. This is what I'm calling humility. And sure enough, I happened to run across a scripture from Fake Jesus talking about the humility and then the exaltation, right? Like there was like this point where there was a humiliation for the Christ consciousness. And then that sparked the next process of the exaltation because... Oh, y'all on my audio today. Because then I realized... Let me mute this audio real quick. 1 second. So then I realized that...
You muted yourself, brother.
Oh, shoot. All right, somebody needs to make me host then. Okay, so I realized in this humiliation that there had to be a signal of where I hit the bottom to kind of let me know, hey, you, the one that's overachiever, this spoon, you've dug it as low as possible here on full moon, Leo. Now we got to go back up. And this time, I'm going to take you up a different route. Because the way you went up last time, that works. But I have something for you that actually is going to make it worth why you went down again in the first place. See, because many can go up. It's like you can even take substances, the toad. You're going to go up and then you're going to come right back. And you're going to have some residual effects, but those are going to eventually wear off. And it's almost like it's going to be a moment, if you don't cultivate that experience, that you never even went on it. So too, even in the experience that I had in that room that day 10 years ago, and all of what I saw and the vast opening of the knowledge and all of that, that's going to wear off at a certain point too. It's been cultivated. It's served its purpose, and then it's given a certain level of wisdom and direction. Again, that direction was you got to descend. You are going to have to strip off all of these abilities that you just gained. See who you truly are under all of that. So that way you know yourself. You know yourself without your abilities. All these abilities like seeing and hearing and all this stuff that the manas, the things that are just giving you stimulus, you need to know yourself without all of that. And by the way, over here, man, it's going wild. Like the system's over here blinking, some stuff that jumped up on the screen. These are the times. The level of power and the level of energy that is transmitting through the space, it's like it cannot be hindered anymore, but everything seems to sometimes work against it. That's even what I felt in the room that day. It was one of those, another person jumps on, yeah, I totally disagree. Yeah, I totally disagree. It was like a bunch of people. They were just like, it was like everybody just wanted to disagree, even though I had only responded the exact same thing that the person had already confirmed was true. So it wasn't even like a real thing that was going on. It was a mock. It was a mock-up. There were several other synchronicities that I actually noticed about the situation, including the title of the actual meeting, that were already trigger points in the past that if I was reading life from patterns, I would have already seen the pattern. However, would that have prevented me from going into the situation? Because this is, again, the difference. The mind, it has now started to recognize patterns, starts to avoid patterns. Also tries to track patterns to know what's going to happen in the future. Eneology can do some of this stuff. However, does a person start using that to just try to avoid situations that are going to end up catching up with them anyway, or are actually a part of the process that they need to go through so that they can wake up to what's really going on? So you see how the thing with knowledge is, and wisdom and power? All of these things are in the measures that you give them, they're so fragile. So this is why it's great to begin to apply this type of knowledge to yourself. So today, now the exaltation begins, the climb, step one of how to make the ascension process happen in 2021. Also, not only master knowledge with the aid of the Gitas, meaning that I'm going to make every effort to go through stanza by stanza and then come back and bring that, or come forward and bring that into the space and actually explain to you step by step how they explain how you get up in and out of this structure and how you design your life properly to ultimately get you to where you need to get. So when you're in old age, you don't feel like what most old people, if you may, feel like. Somebody who's calling themselves old and they feel like, okay, I'm in fear. This is all going to be over for me soon. And that's how they're now ending their lives, right? This is about how to make sure that because then it's going to be too late. Like it's a real thing here. It can be too late. See, there's candid conversations that need to be had. There are battles lost. There are dark forces that do try to hinder the light. Those are very uncomfortable conversations. There are also few paths to actual ascension. That's a very uncomfortable conversation for people. They want a lot of paths. But if there was a lot of paths, there'd be a lot more ascension. Right now, also, we have a real situation with reincarnations. We have so many children in the space that are not getting conscious parents. You can imagine what that looks like. all the souls that are in the astral plane are rushing to get back into this space to have another physical incarnation to work through their karmas. But because of what they were doing before, the allotment is still going to be the same. So when their formulation is being created, they're going to be spawned in parents that are going to give them the ideal life to pick up where they left off with their karma. And if you can just see that as like the vineyard and that there are beings that have responsibility to keep the vineyard, if you may, like the vineyard of souls, like making sure that there's enough conscious people to actually keep when there's more reincarnation portals open so that children are able to come in to conscious parents, get why they don't have protection, the necessary protection for them to get girded up with wisdom, and then they actually live their last incarnation because, you know, they got a perfect run. Now you can see how many children are getting a perfect run. It's way more kids. They don't have parents. The TV is their parent. They don't got none of the knowledge anymore. The knowledge is damn near missing. So this is a real situation. So that's why I trust that there's many here that see their calling of why you need to do this kind of aesthetic that I'm going to mention today so that you could get strong enough and flexible enough to really assist some of the beings that are here in this space and some of the souls that need to come through this, because we have a situation going on. See, in spiritual power, sometimes you don't want to admit certain things. Like it's like spiritual power feels all powerful. It's like being on mescaline or some type of peyote or something like that. That's, you know, it's got your chest poked out and you don't want to admit at times, hey, we're taking a lot of casualties here. And so that's just a real situation. So it's a candid situation for you also to see where you're needed. So these are the basics. The first thing that I want to say is, if you see my dead body and you do an autopsy on it, it's going to give you a bit of an idea of how I lived. I'll say that again, that if you see my dead body and you do an autopsy on it, it's going to reveal to you some of the things about how I lived. So too, when you see the dead body of nations, such as Babylon and even Egypt, you can then gather that this was a product of how it lived. So while there's always this, again, plausible deniability, you know, there's a lot of things into this that wants to tell us this was the perfect one, somebody else messed it up. The truth is, that's like you saying, I was great, and then somebody else messed it up for me. It doesn't make any sense. You're not taking responsibility. The condition of the nations of today is based on what was going on in those nations, what really happened there. And if you look closely, because this is repeating itself, you would imagine they were acting different back then, but it's the same thing. It just, you know, it may look different, but it's the same thing going on, the same vying for attention, the power hungry, the wealthy, the magicians, every single thing that we have going on in our world today with so many people here, it was the same context in the past, but even more potent. And so thus, through a series of events, many of those bodies fell. If you look at a nation like a body within itself, a whole, you know, being, and then when you see it fall or when you see it go into decay, that was because of the aesthetic that it was practicing. That was because of the ritual, if you may, and in this case, the yoga, the unity, if you may, that it was practicing. Because you will not see decay and you will not see failure in anything that is still abiding by the laws and the rules and the traditions. Or at least you'll see the ones last that still have remnants of that. And that's why when you look into India, they still have, or Persia, if you may, they still have remnants. A lot of remnants. They still, like, India is not in the condition that Kemet's in. Kemet didn't even, the people that lived in Kemet are not even there anymore. India is still standing almost, if you may. And this was because that there are different forms of yoga, and one of the most important forms, not to make one higher than the other, but a very important form is known as Raja Yoga, or known as royal yoga, because the word Raja means royal, right? And now if you could think of Ra and you could think of Ja, you can really already connect it there, that whole lineage, as I even said, of the Nagas and the Nagus, and all the way into the full spectrum of this, the Lemurians, and basically the masters passing the knowledge on. Make no mistake, just like it's right now, not everybody was seeking the knowledge. We get this idea that we had an entirely spiritual culture, but that's not what you see in children, even. Children are born with certain essences and certain personalities. And then that creates what they decide to do. And it seems like to do spirituality is even something that you have to groom yourself for. So what I'm saying is that you didn't have the entire nation following the spiritual path, but you always had masters that kept that fire alive, initiates, beings that had a direct connection, what they call them self-realized beings, that when you were ready, they could take you through the process. So that's how the knowledge went from Kemet all the way, which you would say is India and Sri Lanka or South India, because the masters left. It's just like anybody else who has any real wisdom. You can see how things are being run. And you can see the decay just through wisdom. You don't even got to go look in a crystal ball or anything. You could just see power-hungry Ramses, big statues of oneself. It's like you put a big giant statue of yourself in front of everybody. What are you really saying? If everybody's supposed to be going within. That's what I'm saying. This becomes uncomfortable, but it confirms itself. As you keep going through this, it'll confirm itself because of the life you're living now. Not so much as you got to go through history and then find that clue, and then now you found that clue, and then you're, okay, that must have been what happened. No, now. Don't imagine that you're living in anything different than what has always been going on, because Earth has a specific purpose. That's why we talked about tonight expanding beyond just the world structure, because this is going to keep going on here, because this is the design of this, and it has a purpose to do this. And just as this one exists, there's also spaces that don't have any of what you would call the drawbacks of what goes on in this space, because wisdom has been gained. So let's keep going with this. So I wanted to first make sure we all understand why immortality is facts. If the first man was a man, the first being was a man or a woman or any kind of physical body only, when it died, there would be no more. Okay, I just want you to realize this for one moment, to make sure that you don't ever have stuff playing with you, telling you that you're not going to live forever. If you were not somehow living forever and there wasn't going to be a continuation of you, the first one that you were in the image of, right? Once it croaked, there would be no more. So sometimes we have to sit into that. It was mentioned in another way. Your body is replacing itself all the time, right? Like they say, your tongue then replaces all cells. Atoms are basically empty space mostly. So if you've been replaced within a 10-year period or 5-year period, 7-year period, your whole framework has been replaced. How are you even still here? What's holding you together? So this is what we're going to address tonight. What's holding everything together? So that way we can move beyond what's happening over here in the physical, because this stuff is going to keep getting wilder and wilder, because now they have an army of trolls. They've raised at least 2 to 3 generations of numbskulls. There's entire cultures and nations blown out. Their idea, they're just trying to get money right now. Get Wall Street and GameStop and Robinhood and scale up, and I need investors, and I'm trying to become a monopoly and blah, blah, blah. And it's like no wisdom. And you only know this if you have a bit yourself. And then you can start doing numbers or and start realizing just where it's going to be the kill over point, because you already know, if they're not practicing wisdom, there's a real time limit here to how much one cannot practice wisdom at this scale, and there not be some repercussions, okay? And so what this is about shielding yourself from those repercussions that are going to happen and are already happening. They're just getting swept under the carpet. Right? Like everybody's waiting for it to be reported on the news. And like I know, 2 months later, there's a whole nother story. People pretty much forgot about Trump now. He just kind of exit stage left. And they've now fired off enough news in the first 2 weeks of January or after the 20th that it's out of sight, out of mind, because basically everybody's minds is in these news networks, right? So here we are. I wanted to make sure that why we brought that up, though, while you would still think that it's a small amount of people making the decisions for everyone, do not sell yourself that lie. It is the majority, because the majority is the one casting the votes. And that is why they want, you would think, you like, well, shit, if they're bullies and they're going to do it all what they want to do anyway, why the hell are they asking for a vote or like a permission? They just do what they want to do. It doesn't work like that. People have to agree. That's what creates the co-creation. It's a real thing. There's a binding, a pact. Like pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic. This is a republic? Shit. We're the Jedi. This U.S. was still a republic. They got two forms of government functioning right now, a republic and then an incorporated business that sits about 5 Mile Square in Washington called the United States of America. So there's United States and then the United States of America. Meanwhile, they got everybody else like, this doesn't matter to you. Let's just, here, buy this from Amazon. You see what I mean? You can't play around with this anymore. That's why we're having this conversation tonight, because I'm not going to be responsible for anybody that sat in front of me not getting the true wisdom about how to expand beyond this foolishness. Now, we learn how to deal with it because that is a part of the lesson. We learn how to flow in it, to make something of it. But let us not make any mistakes about how we still need to be working on ourselves to expand beyond it, and how you can make that make that connection in a very vivid way. So I wanted to just make sure it's clear. I have some notes here that the things that we're seeing going on in the reality are really being done by the collective, because the collective is agreeing. And now we have a large part of the world that has been living in. This is why they have treated China the way they've treated China. This is why they treated India the way they treated India, because these are the highest populations in the world. And so since they had already gone through their oppression while we were basically living it up, now they are sending a program to them that it's time for you to live it up. And living it up means buying Nikes. Living it up means creating more startups. Living it up means, and they give them a whole list of what they want in their projector, but they need agreements, souls, spirits, whatever we want to call them. They need that to actually create it with. Now, that seems also like a common sense anyway, since it's people that are building the structure, but it's to make sure that we're not being naive again, that these small group of people are running anything. It's just they've created a system to get everyone to just believe that that's what they have to do. And they've done that spiritually. They've done that in different arenas, financially, any arena that they feel really can get you, where it hurts. That's what they work with. Right? So let us realize then that every day you wake up and you have this new round of energy. Where did that energy come from? Where are you getting this energy from? Basically, in conclusion, to be straight, where are you getting this money from? Every day you wake up with some current, it's like you have a fresh round of current. Where are you getting it from? You may say your food. But technically, man, I'm sure you look at that chicken sandwich and you kind of realize at this point that there's no way the chicken sandwich can really run the body from a fuel level. You know what I mean? It's like you just put a chicken sandwich in the car and just started it up. It's like, how's the car running? Oh, chicken sandwiches, we good? No. That is not what's happening. The body is not running itself completely on vegetables and chicken sandwiches. It's pulling in light. It's eating light. Essence, gas, right? I mean, are we there? I mean, can we agree that I would not go any further if this is not clicking in you that it should be obvious that this cheeseburger cannot feed a spirit. Now, even in the old times, they knew that there were things that were actually more wholesome for spirits, right? So they talked about like how, you know, there's certain type of aesthetics that you can practice, like feeding animals, and that when you feed animals, that it somehow it blends over into your physical body getting nourished, or when you basically help people that are being afflicted also by Shani or Saturn, then it actually reduces the amount of affliction that Shani or Saturn can have on you. So it's like a system of being able to cancel out frequencies based on like frequencies. So it's like you can really stack up Dharma as a wall against the karma of the worlds if you understand how to work your energy, right? And so just to come to the point here, though, you keep getting this energy allotment every single day. So where is it coming from? But I guess instead of digging into that, it's better to really look at how is it being spent. How is it being spent? Here's the deal. Suffering is also known in the ancient text as working. The translation, it means to work. That basically working is suffering. And it turns out that all of the masters knew that this plane was called the plane of suffering or the plane of working. Okay? So this means that anybody that jumped in here expected to work. And the only real division that went on in this space was whether you were getting paid or not. I'm going to break this down to you in a very, very deep level. See, so you're getting this allowance every day, this energy, your fat, basically. Your allotment of fat. So just so you understand, fat is energy. This is why, of course, all fats burn down. The oils you can light, and you can have a candle. Remember the whaling, right? They would take the blubber from the whale, and London lit itself for years on the flesh and the blubber of whales, right? They would bring them huge lard blocks, and then they would burn that. And that's how, damn, just think about it. When you think about, man, this was not too long ago. They were the whaling industry. It was to collect the oil. So what is the oil? The fat is the energy. Okay? So in these principles, and I want you to really listen to what I'm saying. In these principles, they say the whole art really is to burn the fat. Okay? Now, here's what's powerful about the Gitas. See, what people have done is they've allowed their mind to read something. Oh, light the start these rituals for the divas, burn the oils and the fats, right? And so they'll go out and do that externally. They'll start this festival, and then they'll bring these gods and these images and all that. And then you'll be over there thinking, man, those people really worship the gods, or they got something, they got to have a connection with the gods, but they don't. Because the one with wisdom knows that what they're saying is the devas are the chakras or the lights inside of your body. You should turn them on basically through yoga or unity or any aesthetic. So that way they start to spin, so they burn the fat that is basically the excess of what you're getting in energy every single day. And then when that's burned, which you can't really see, it's like a sweat or essence, it's then united with the cosmos. And then you've spent this energy or invested this energy in the beyond. Okay, so let me get this to you again, because this everything that we're talking about right now and we will be talking about in the next few weeks hinges on your awareness of this. You're transmuting energy. You're here to transmute the energy. But when you're transmuting it into something like, let's say, for instance, let me give it to you the real way. Okay, so now let's talk about the opposite, because we learned through contrast. You've been working all day. This job is ridiculous. The boss has lost their damn mind. Always telling you what to do. You're working harder than everybody else, right? Building this company or helping them do what they need to do. You come home after a week or 2 weeks, they give you this check. Okay? Now you've worked. You've suffered. But what can that check really do for your spiritual condition? What has that really done for your soul, is what I'm saying. So see, that's how you can get paid for your energy, but it's not really going to add up to anything. Versus if you use at least 25 or 30% of this energy that you're getting each day to burn off the fat, or basically use the energy to do something that is going to be transmuted into wealth for you. Either way, you're going to work, but now you're getting paid. And that payment is already, it's already deposited into the soul. Okay? I want you to realize what would be happening when one starts practicing these type of aesthetics and goes through with this. Yoga means unity. It's not just the physical part of yoga. This is why you could see folks doing the physical yoga. I mean, they could put their foot, I won't say in their ass, but damn near. But then they still, it's just like they're practicing yoga. It's like the whole rest of it doesn't come along with it. It's because yoga is not just the physical practice, even though the physical practice is extremely instrumental in the whole thing and how it all connects. But what it really is connecting it all. And we've talked about before, so what would we need to connect then? That's what would be my next question. What's separate? Well, the mind seems to like doing things that the body is going to suffer for. The soul seems to be omitted from things that the mind wants to think about. So it's just like these three powers that you have at minimum are not in union. Wow, it's actually raining out here right now. That's incredible, because it's been really, really hot, and there's been no rain because we're going into that season. But just to see it rain, we give thanks, and I just wanted to take the time for that. So what I'm saying here, then, let me just give this to you as a friend. This path right now that we're on, which is not going to last more than a few 20 years, 30 years, depending upon how old you are, 40 years, 50 years tops. It's for you to be working. So that way you don't never have to work again. There's no such thing as work. You end the cycles of reincarnation. Because what starts happening rapidly when you start burning the fat is you start basically running up a bank account, if you may, of dharma. And so these seeds of karma that you do every single day, like, let me show you, like, this, what makes this realm dangerous is you even spending money is a certain amount of karma, because they do other things with money. You even paying your landlord because your landlord is doing something that you don't even know. You drinking some of this, this milk that comes from the store because the cow so all the time you're basically racking up this karma seeds, they call it. But when you're doing your yoga or your unity principles, your aesthetic, it charges those off. And this is how your life starts to really change. And don't look for people around you doing this. Somebody today was bucking this conversation that I was having about this. And they were like, well, no, I think that there's other ways to get in. And I'm like, wait a minute. How many people are we talking about anyway? And 9 billion people, how many you think actually have practiced ascension anyway? It has to be 1%. Like that really know the path and have actually gone through the process and kited up out of here. It's got to be around 1%. So anything that you're addressing to 1% of people anyway, it's like, you can't even take chances with those kind of odds that maybe something would work. And this is why our ancestors spent thousands of years refining this process. So let's take a moment. I'm going to put you into the right groove of what you need to have to go through this process to study along with what I'm going to be teaching, just to make sure that everybody has it. It is going to be, if you may, or someone to look at it as a case study. A way of seeing that if the last knowledge that I feel like was here to teach everybody the absolute truth from 2 specific people that I'm going to point out, through our process of digging deeper into this knowledge, if we find it to be true, and I'm saying that as us coming in together, I already know what I'm looking at. I already have enough knowledge to know when someone's telling the truth and knows the truth. And it's because there's extra stuff you add. When you've actually been through the whole thing, and you've really seen it, it's like the difference between somebody who's telling you they've been somewhere. Oh, yeah, I went to the concert. He's like, so what happened? Yo, it was all right. He showed up. He sang. All right, what song did he sing first? You wasn't there. So when somebody is describing, because that's happening a lot. Remember, the mind is now completely thinking it's understanding what the spiritual experience is like, and the spiritual experience cannot be understood. It only is accessible through meditation, or meaning to quiet the consciousness completely, because the manas, or the mind is blind. I've sent a link across the chat. The mind is blind. Let me explain that to you. So what the mind is doing is the mind has literally sculpted everything around you that you're seeing based on its perceptions of sending out lots of queries magnetically to the space that's around it to try to get a picture of what's going on. And the picture that it has even formed at this stage is not completely accurate. We talked about that. You start opening up the third eye, all this stuff starts looking different. So the mind is actually trying to see the world through things like the sun comes out, the sun has light, I'm walking on the ground, I've gotten to arguments before, I feel. So this is how the mind is operating. So you imagine how the mind is like a computer. How many queries does it need to send out so it could get a complete idea of what's going on around it? Now, you and I both know, if you've ever tried to do any meditating, who's always the first one to jump in? The mind. You will see how slick the mind is if you just try to sit there and say, okay, for 5 minutes, we're not going to think about anything. All right, mind? Okay. 8 minutes later, the mind's already gone on something. You don't even really see when it started going off again until you catch it. Like, yo, we were supposed to not think about anything. But there's been at least 2 minutes of thinking about something. So the mind is slick. It's already running. It's already sending out queries. It's already sending out those magnetics. And it's that they call that the manas. So what this discipline is about reining that all in. And actually being able to control the mind. And then even beyond controlling the mind, to actually send the light and the power back into the soul where it can benefit the most. Because what the mind is prepared to do with this fuel and prepared to do with this energy is pretty much what you're seeing every day. The mind wants to build more in the external world. That's why there's nothing around you that did not come from a thought first. That chair you're sitting on was in somebody's mind first before that whole design came up. They called up them folks. They got it all printed out or fabricated, etc. And then now you're sitting on it. But it was in somebody's mind to do that first. So the mind only has intentions to keep putting, even knowing it came in here with nothing, it will spend its entire life here trying to do something that will be guaranteed to be undone. Right? That's especially for the selfish mind, like the person who's just working to. Now, if you're trying to build a legacy and you're helping your children and all, that's a whole different thing. But I'm talking about the cat that's still out there just dolo by himself trying to make mad money. We're gonna talk about here for a moment that what is mentioned is that the mind, the immaturity or the mind of a child, they don't have a sword because they don't have wisdom. That's why they need parents. Parents protect children. Because even that whole thing, and they show you the battle that goes on in a child's mind, that whole thing with the child either having to study or go play, that's their first battle. That's the simplicity of the battle right there. And kids start with it. And if you can ask them which one they would rather do, very few kids, almost 1% will say, I'm going to study, mommy. So this is how we'll be able to keep every step by step. That way you're not believing in somebody. What the thing is that when these masters came, they could care less if you believed in them. In fact, they did not want you to believe in them because that leads you astray. Why are you believing in me? That's why they would do things. Like I said, they would burp, they would fart, and this kind of thing in the build. And, this kind of thing would be foreign right now. You're like, oh, Joe Dispenza, and he just rips off one. You're like, foul beast. You know what I mean? It's just like you thinking of him so high, but the yogis would do that on you all the time. They're like, man, you trust me, you don't want to get stuck on me, and I don't want you to get stuck on me. Because not only then it's messing up totally what I'm here trying to do for you. Also, this is the antithesis to what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to show you something. For those who are still trying to figure out, like, so where is this coming from? Like, who was putting in the work? Just to set the record straight here. So most of what you're seeing in, let's say, the quote unquote conscious community, especially when it comes from any kind of awareness of metaphysical principles, any kind of awareness of the passageway into India and the knowledge in which they taught there, anything that had to do with the yoga and the applications of different yogas such as Kriya Yoga, anything that had to do with initiating the Western culture and the European cultures into anything about the Eastern teachings, predominantly, wholeheartedly came from two people. One of those people is the man that you're looking at right here, Sri Yukteswar, right? There are many that have read his books. There are many brothers that have read his books and come back and be like, yo, he's on a whole nother level. He said he was sitting in the deep meditation already with the power, which was inherent. You inherited the power back in the day. And in this, clearly being able to see the future, clearly being able to see all that, that's just part of the siddhis. Once you get the siddhas, you could do all sorts of stuff. That's what we saw yesterday about the lokas. Like the moment you reach intelligence level, or what they're called the intelligences, you can get back into any of the physical planes and you can communicate with the gods. Now I'm going to, or actually the beings beyond the gods and the devas, etc. So there was an open line of communication once you've reached a certain stage. Now I'm bringing all this up for a reason. And it's because Yukteswar was saying that he was sitting there basically in the meditation and he realized that he needed to get to the Europeans ASAP. The mission needed to be carried on. This is almost 100 years ago. This is a 1935. From looking into the future, and of course, from what he taught was what Steve Jobs absorbed, the Beatles absorbed. So all of the initiations, because see, Madame Blavatsky and Kuthumi and all that they already knew that even what was his name? Krishnamurti. they already knew that they were the frauds, basically. Even Krishnamurti went on his deathbed saying, hey, you know what? I was played by these Theosophical Society people. They wanted me to basically be Krishna in front of everybody and lead everyone into this worship because they were trying to get the crowd in the Western Hemisphere. Versus Yukteswar and his disciple, Yogananda, were saying like, okay, listen, we have this mission, and this mission is to basically to take on to carry the knowledge of enlightenment into this new age. And we're going to do that by writing these books. Now, Yukteswar wrote some books. This book here, God Talks with Arjuna, the Bhagavad Gita, both volumes, it puts any other recording of any kind of mystical works to sleep. It makes you realize they don't even know what they're talking about. They're still playing around in the lower locus. Obviously, the spirituality that people are talking about that they've achieved and that they want others to be initiated in. And it brings that stanza by stanza by stanza, letting you understand exactly how your mind is playing around with you. And how you're allowing it, and how that already is something that occurred, and you're on the battlefield now. So I'm going to read you something. This mentions, give me 1 second here. It says, from the moment of conception to the surrender of the last breath, man and woman has to fight in each incarnation innumerable battles. Biological, hereditary, bacteriological, physiological, climatic, social, ethical, political, sociological, psychological, metaphysical. So many varieties of inner and outer conflicts. So when you can ask yourself right off, well, why would I want to end the reincarnations? This. You have been fighting your whole life. A sister was saying that Color Purple. I've been fighting my whole life. They say even in the womb, like you're fighting not to be premature. You're fighting even the frequencies that you're being, that your mother, the environment that she's in right then. You're fighting the food that she's giving you or the environment that she may be in and the food that she's giving you. So your whole thing is about survival. You just finished fighting thousands of other souls trying to get into an incarnation. That's symbolic to the man semen with all of the semen running, but only one semen able to enter the womb. So I would love to tell you that this was the place that there was going to be no more fighting at, but that's not the truth. And if we're refusing to live the truth, then we're living in the delusionary aspects of things, and that's catching up. These are the powers that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm talking about right now, are powers that you have, that you could activate, that you can make these changes and these moves in your consciousness, so you have an immense amount of value, and you have a future. But if you don't pay attention to what's actually going on around you, especially with the decisions that you're making and how your energy is moving, you're not going to have an option, though. And it's that cut and dry because it's about maturity. And until you get, maturity is wisdom. That's why they say, okay, so maturity. Maturity means it's getting older, right? Like I say, the beef jerky is matured. So the beef jerky is old, right? The wine has matured. So in our world, we see old people as being technically mature. And then we see old people as being wise. And these seem to kind of run together. And this is because we have to be able to connect that wisdom actually, not necessarily being old. Wisdom is maturity. Because in adolescence, early in life, in youth, you have no sword. And I'm gonna read this to you. But before I do that, I want you to understand that. So you then have these two forms of senses. You have one sense that it senses the external reality, and it takes up a lot of fuel to project and to actually create and to move around things in the external. It uses up a lot of fuel to do this. And then you have this soul consciousness, or basically self-realization aspect, where you can choose to go within and then literally begin to do the work on yourself. So you can sit there when I say, hey, feel yourself, feel your body, connect into yourself. This is where you're able to sit there for a moment, shut everything else off with the mind, and then start breathing, and then immediately feel yourself in the body and in your heart space, feeling just the energy. So there's these cultivation practices that you can do with yourself, and this is going to be a benefit to you. But it's not just going to be a benefit to you for what you feel like on the physical plane. It's going to be a benefit to you for what's happening on the spiritual plane. And you can then imagine that if you only did the external things, since they have no value on the spiritual plane, that was the sign of that you didn't kind of come in here with your wallet and your car and your bank account. You didn't come in here with any of that. So when you're leaving up out of here, anything that was associated with that doesn't really make a difference. The only thing that you can really do is to try to get what you created in the external world to serve your spiritual growth. Do you see your strategy? Like when you're thinking you got a whole list of things you want to become in life, start Xing off those things that are not going to benefit your spiritual life. Because if you can also make your external reality build up Dharma, and what you're doing in the external, build up Dharma for your spirit, you got a win-win situation. So here we go. So what wisdom is then, since we've now identified that children are seen to have the disadvantage of maturity at times. So they lack this wisdom. This wisdom is like a sword. So the parents, as we mentioned, are there to protect the child as they go through this process of gaining this wisdom. So this means that this is like a quest then, where wisdom is actually an innate ability. It's there, but it's dormant, and you need to unlock it. This is why, like, even when we say wisdom at times to young folks, they're like, oh, man, I hope we ain't get into no parables, or, here we go, more wisdom. You see what I mean? So there's this kind of attitude where it's like it can't seem to dial into unlocking that. It's like pulling the sword from the stone, only until you get ready to actually start practicing wisdom. So then what happens is the preliminary point of the person beginning to practice wisdom is like them fighting without having a sword. So they lose a lot of battles. And this is why it's dangerous to have children that are not being taken care of, because they're constantly being assailed and they're constantly losing the battle. So obviously this process of unlocking wisdom starts bringing us right to, well, we can't really reach wisdom inside of our consciousness if the consciousness is always busy doing the opposite of what wisdom is, which is using the manas. So if it's constantly going outside, you got to first be able to quiet the mind before you're actually able to tap into this treasure of yours called wisdom. Now, wisdom is not me telling you this knowledge right now. I want to make sure that's very clear. It's not this knowledge. This is knowledge. Wisdom is when you apply this knowledge and it activates inside you and it becomes a feeling. That's the wisdom. Okay, so I just want to make sure that, we can at least give some differentiations between, okay, now you understand it from a mind level versus now you get it and you practice the yoga with aggression, passion. Because see, what you don't want, and I'm going to be very clear here, is you don't want to run out of gas on the battlefield. You need to understand what I'm saying right now. The driven, the ones who have the most stamina, if you may, on the battlefield will prevail. So you can imagine the battle going on and you got wind. You're going to win. You're not getting tired. You're just getting warmed up. This is why it's so important in the yoga or union that the body starts really getting shaped up. That's why I say these masters work thousands of years and they introduced the external yoga to unite the body to the mind. And then at the end, the Shavasana, which is literally an evocation. The Shavasana is literally then going to attempt to unify you with your supreme being in that moment. After you work the karma, you burn the fat. You start sending all your essence basically into a transmutated form into the cosmos. It starts building a field around you. As you keep going through the process, then you finally cut off. Shavasana. The body is tired now. It's kind of like, okay, I don't even want to think. I just want to go to sleep. But the consciousness is fully charged with prana. So then when you enter in that borderline relaxation, sleep-like state, God consciousness starts to activate. And then what this process is to learn, for you to learn how to deal with God consciousness. Because the moment that you start thinking about God consciousness go away. We already talked about that whole thing. The moment you're like, oh my goodness, I feel something. Oh my goodness, I saw something. Oh my goodness, I was seeing in my life. I was seeing the other day and my eyes weren't open. I was literally seeing everything as it really was and my eyes were closed. And then my mind was like, yo, your eyes are closed. And everything got dark again. And I was like, man, this is wild. So this is why you got to keep on this. And see, I wanted to reveal again, because we've been working with the yoga pretty heavy with Andrew. He's going to come in next week and holler at us about a lot of different things. We're doing eniology yoga. But we've been having a great time demystifying a lot of the belief systems around what people think goes on with the physical yoga. And one of those is that you kind of imagine that this yoga girl or whatever that you've been watching that knows how to, again, put her head behind her ear or whatever, that in a nutshell that she, because she's that flexible, is going to remain that way. Like, oh, she's got it. Look at her go. She's just not even bothering her anymore to do it. She just was born like that. 3 days, Andrew says. In 3 days of not practicing yoga, you already start really feeling that the body is going to need that, is needing to keep that up. So it's just like your workout then. We're just talking about external yoga. It's just like your workout. You start falling off after a few days. Here we go again. And the most important thing about this, I'm going to reveal in a moment, but because there's a lot of deep things in here about, you come in and you start this practice with your body and you hold yourself to that practice. And then you take over your consciousness. I'm going to keep going. So the danger of the manas is, which means the external building of the world, is that everything that you build externally confirms that it attempts to confirm to you that you're a finite being. Okay, I'm going to explain that again. Too much external, too much manas. Hey, what do we got going on? What am I doing tomorrow? And everything like, just external, like the mind trying to see everything. It starts to make the consciousness like a creature that feels like it's finite because it's constantly witnessing like something breaking, something not working. The arguments, the quarrels, the things that you build, and it gets torn down. So this, because you are storing up literally who you are in these external objects and they're breaking. So this kind of reconfirms in a weird subconscious way that you can be broke, right? But when you are feeding into the internal, I want to explain how that works out in the ancient scriptures and all the way up to the modern. They call it worshiping the devas, okay? Now, you know how I feel about worship, especially bowing down to anything external. And I'm going to explain to you exactly how, once again, that whole external perception of things has done it again. Totally ruined it for everyone. Totally didn't let everyone understand what was really meant to worship the devas. You have to look at the history. The devas were light. More specifically, the chakras. To worship a deva was to worship light or to worship the chakra. Now, where is the chakra? It's inside, not outside. So if you were worshiping devas in order to basically build your light, which is what happens when you do, that means you would be basically feeding your chakras internally. So then, as I mentioned earlier, when you're creating something, it actually becomes something in the astral world and in the reality. And I'm gonna let this now seep out now, because I feel like I gotta, in order to not hang the consciousness, I need to let you realize the process of how a natural enlightened life is supposed to go. Okay, you start off as a child. If you have conscious parents, they protect you, and then they show you. You generally you're going to have that same process anyway. You're going to have to walk all the path all the way up, back down, and then on to the beyond again. And in that process, you're going to find your uniqueness. You're going to practice your aesthetic, and then you're going to be ready to move on. Okay, so that was like if you had good parents. Now, those times seem to be kind of like a little short. So if you had wild parents that weren't practicing any of these properties, that means you were going to be born without the sword. You weren't going to get much protection from the things that can assail you. And then you were going to actually be living defeated with King Ego, while King Soul would be tucked into the coccyx of your spine because King Soul has been dethroned. Now, very specifically, King Soul is in the Adumla Oblongata. It's the iStock photo. But anyway, it shows you again very specifically that there is a being sitting there. We've done this with superior brachium, but it's actually this area that is referred to directly. And when you look at this stock photo, I can't believe it's not here now, and it's on my iPad, and I guess the iPad didn't bring it over in the cloud. If you don't see a person sitting there in the stock photo, you're blind. And it brings, once again, a reference towards that while the center of the body, again, as we talked about in the navel, is a very powerful energy center for union, it still appears that the consciousness naturally rests within this region in the brain like it's sitting on a throne. And on that throne, that it's there because if it's not there, in this case we'll say King Soul is not there, King Ego will go and reside in that place. And of course, this is I guess maybe we should show the superior brachium here just so everyone gets a idea of this. I thought that it would be easy for me to find that image because it was like the first thing in the query this morning. But we talked about this before. And this is the same area, the medulla oblongata, right? And we talked about how in that part of the body, there appears to be a being suspended on what we know as the cross, because this is where the two hemispheres of the brain are. And that sitting right in the forehead of this being is also, as a reference here, the pineal gland, right? So let me see this here. Okay, I guess it's only showing that part. So you could see it a little bit on that right side. It says PE. It says PE, and that right there, of course, is the pineal gland. So it's basically that the real form of our consciousness, and also that this area is about 1 inch. This is another thing. This lays more to what I was saying about that your general size is actually pretty small. And you can imagine them where all of these stories are coming from about you, like, being battling spiders and all this kind of stuff. Because if what we're hearing about the locusts, they say that basically when you reach a level of intelligences, you can then project yourself into other worlds and other spaces. So if you're only 1 inch big, you're like a 1 inch big superhuman. If we throw you into a world where there are spiders that are just the same size as some of the tarantulas out here, snakes and all this kind of thing, you're literally getting a mini showcase of all of the different things that will be going on in an adventure. But because you would have all these powers, like what you're seeing with the superior brachium, imagine if the superior brachium wasn't connected to the body and it just had a pineal gland. So the same pineal gland that can bring you into high levels of consciousness right now as a whole body would just have this body to deal with. And then it would only eat as much as what this body needs to consume. And actually, that would be really nothing because this body is actually calibrated to feed from fluids, juices, gases. So just remember that the physical body that we're living in is a reflection of this. We're literally bouncing light, which is from the chakras. And this light is first condensing as one body and then spreading into the other body. And this is why they show this, man, I don't have my geometry sitting here today. Let me go in here real quick and see if I can find the geometry. But basically that there's a way that you're bound, that's why when your left hand controls your right hemisphere, your left hemisphere controls there's this juxtaposition that happens. Let me just see if I can do this clean up by modified and see if I took that image. Let me go up here. No, that image did not get brought into the library. So this image is, some of you have seen it before, and they show, actually, let me just go on my desktop real quick to see if it's here. Images, and then screen captures. Let's see, screen captures. Okay, no, it's not there. So in this image, they show you where the guy is pointing like this. And then there's two like lines going from the hand, and then there's an eye, and then they go to eye level, right? It's an alchemical image where the guy is standing like this. And then they're showing how there's like this zigzagging that goes on where the left eye is perceiving, or the right side of the brain is connected to this eye. So there's like this zigzagging. So I'm going to explain exactly what that means, because it's a deep part of, so how do we have this larger physical body with these larger chakras in it if we have an entire replica sitting right on the back of our head already equipped with chakras, which is the thymus gland, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland. Those are basically replicas of the chakras that are also in the body. So let's just read the treaty really quick. The yoga treaties identified that there are 7 centers in ascending order. This is, of course, the Muladhara. Okay, so we're going to the basics here. The Muladhara is sitting in the cossack of the base of the spine. So this is, of course, where the tail is, but the let's say your tail and the 3 fused vertebrae in the bottom of the tail is where that actual chakra is, and it is generally dormant until awakened, right? Then you have the Swadhisthana, that's the sacral, that's 2 inches above the Muladhara, right? So 2 inches above the Muladhara, you have that other chakra sitting right there in your sacral, right? And then you have this Manipura, which is basically on the lumbar, opposite to the navel. So this is basically sitting like in the back. So if you can imagine, this is like a light network going like this, where this light is bouncing off one and then pinging to the other. This is why when you unlock the root chakra, the beam that comes from that can shine onto that other chakra and start activating that chakra, and then it'll keep beaming that light up as it goes into awakening what? The pineal gland. But why does it need to be awake? Because King Ego, i.e. the mind, is sitting in that space right now. And this is very key to understand, that when you lose the battle, it's important to understand this is what this whole Bhagavad Gita is about, the battlefield of Arjuna. It's about coming into the world, losing the battle, and now needing to basically recover and win the battle. So it's coming right from that standpoint. It's not coming from this, in the beginning, the gods were, Hell no, that's not where we are right now. That's why it makes a lot of stuff when you're reading it feel like that stuff is a joke, because this is a way that you can completely see what is the natural progression of consciousness from where it is and enlightenment from where it is. That can only be put together by someone or some beings that have been through that process. So that's what I was saying. Like, even now that we understand Joytish numerology, which is Eniology, we find out that Sri Yukteswari was a Joytisha. So also remember, to be a Joytisha inside of the actual culture means that you have an initiation through Venus. Venus is basically the one responsible for teaching the daemons the mystical sciences. Those are the mystical science about the chakras or the planets and the movement of the planets. And this is very interesting because there's even a remark that still the seer has to have the essence. So it's not just knowing Eniology, it's having an intuition to be able to pick up what other subtle energies are also around your field or another person's field. So we'll keep going. We have the anahata, the dorsal, which is opposite the heart, right? So you're seeing that the chakras are not in a straight line. That's why we have diagrams that show, they map out the chakras and they show you they're not in a straight line. It seems real convenient to make charts like that, but that's not how they're set up. They're really set up to ping off each other like I'll bring some of my images next time, because I show you in the Royal Sciences how they're showing this. But the real Royal Science is Raja Yoga. And this is why all this has to be restored. Like, I'm not giving up on humanity. I'm not saying we can't make it over 1%, but I'm also not going to be naive here. If we're going to take this out of a tailspin, somebody's got to dedicate their life to this. That's really why I'm here. I'm not here talking to everybody, imagining that everybody's going to be able to practice this aesthetic. It only takes a few beings that decide that they're just going to do this with their life. This is why this is so important, because it's becoming to a point where nobody knows what they want to do to get the biggest result. Because everybody else is like, well, just go to Instagram and post a picture up. And it's like, if you want to get the biggest results in your existence, period, irrefutable, this has already been tested. Masters have already done this. It's already been available, and everybody has still been in this modern spiritual world just stealing from this. And not even doing a good job. They're not even explaining the whole thing, especially in a way that we can really start comprehending this in 2021. So let's finish this. So we have the I guess this will be the Visuddha. That's the cervical at the base of the neck, right? And then we have the Ajna chakra, right, which is the seat in the spiritual eye, right? Located between they say, of course, traditionally it's in the eyebrows, but it's actually directly connected by polarity to the Abdullah Amlagata. So we saw how that literally connects right into the center of the forehead of the being on the back of the head. We've had past episodes explaining how the eye that you're really looking actually through a hexagonal field when you're looking through the eye. And then you're looking through both eyes. So then you're seeing basically the dualistic deception, and that the practice of rolling the eyes in the head or turning the eyes up is actually to get the eyes to focus into the pineal gland to send the light up into one source. And so then we have the Sahasrara, which is the top. Like, so that's just a fan, right? A full lotus fan that's just sitting up here. So it says the seven centers are divinely planned, and this is what we need to understand. Divinely planned exits. Listen to what it says. The seven centers are divinely planned exits. I just stop right there. What is a divinely planned exit? That means that somehow you even literally knew that you were going to go through all of this, and you created these exits that you could get out. That's why I'm saying this thing is dense with knowledge. These are excerpts that I'm just pulling right from the Gitas. And you can blow right by that. The 7 centers are divinely planned exits. And you could just keep going and be like, whoa, wait a minute. What is a divinely planned exit? By that definition, that means that you had planned this some other space and time and left yourself doors inside of your body to be able to get out. But it goes on. Or trap doors through which the soul has descended into the body and through which it must reascend by a process of meditation. So this thing about trap doors is really like, okay, now you're in it. How do you get out? Okay, now you're in Wonderland, Alice. How the hell do we get out? Where did you come in here at? Oh my goodness, it's all looking the same. Why is the Cheshire Cat grinning at me? Where's the queen? You get to be in this wonderland because like you can't see where the doors are that you got in here on. So remember, the more the manas, which are like horses, draw you out into the external planes and take you further and further into the battlefield, the less you're going to be aware of where you came in, especially if you get knocked off. Right? And then what we're saying is that unless you have parents that were really, really on their dean, you already been knocked off. That's just for you to determine. This is about how to get back up and how to actually gain stamina, get on the battlefield, and destroy King Ego, which has a specific name. And that name, I'll actually build on that because not now, but in our next build, how still in the Sanskrit, man, it'd be like an etymologist's dream in Sanskrit. Because every single part of the word really tells you what you're dealing with and how. So instead of you looking at this like a physical person, it actually breaks it down to let you see the traits that actually create this kind of energy. And then it just clicks even more, right? So let me go with another one here. All of the astral, cerebral, spinal plexuses in their natural state of spiritual, reflecting the diverse aspects of the divine intelligence and vibratory power of the superconscious of the soul. But when the energies of these centers are drawn outward under the influence of the senses and their connection with the soul's pure discriminatory faculty is diminished, their expression becomes proportionately perverted. What I'm talking about here, or what's being referred to here, is even when you go on an ayahuasca journey or you go on a DMT journey, because you haven't actually calibrated your consciousness and your body and your soul to deal with all of what you're realizing, at a certain point, your senses, the manas, start to influence the journey and then begin to pervert the experience by like trying to gain emotional or visual stimulus. What are we seeing? What is that over there? This is also why I said before, generally, while ayahuasca is great and the medicines are great, those are not really what change people, though. It's people that change people. People can take this stuff and totally end up the same way they are, or darker, if you may, like just more distorted. And this is because what'll happen is that they'll come under they'll take it external. They'll use the power externally, and then external senses will still kick in. So this basically means until you learn how to really fortify your consciousness, really, and you take that on as your own responsibility, you cannot use certain things to their full benefit anyway. And then when you do actually build it the proper way, you don't even need that stuff. Because here's the thing. If you can get there with the thing, but you can't get there without it, what does that tell you? That's like, once again, that you could do things with money, but when you don't have any money, what you about? So it presents that same thing, but in another guise. And that's why I was saying about the mind, because some people can actually start going on this journey. They think that they know everything about spirituality, but they haven't even began to realize yet that you don't know about spirituality. You feel it, right? So it's the experience and it to be able to do it. See, because what happens is that, again, once you go into the Shavasana and you lay in there and you start you've really done some real yoga, in this case, the physical one, and you're laying there and you start connecting, you feel this feeling over your body, you come into this appreciation and awareness that not everybody can feel that feeling. And that to even be able to feel that feeling has such a high value. Like imagine the people in pain. Imagine the people who their consciousness is not, that's who we're talking about predominantly. The people who their consciousness don't even like this kind of stuff. They're trying to figure out, if Cardi B's coming back or not. And so that kind of mindset is nowhere near prepared for this. And you need to realize that while your friends are conscious and you have a lot of conscious people on your Facebook and Instagram, and that's making up a nucleus around you, by far, 95% of the beings on the planet have not necessarily reached any stage of awareness like this. So it already makes it something that one has to really, really focus on and really pay attention to in order to be able to achieve. Give me one quick second here. Oh, great. The picture's here. Okay. So this one was from Dreams Time, right? So they've drawn up the medulla oblongata, right? And look at the person sitting here. I know the person that must have been mocking this up, because this is the real one, right? So this is the model that they have to go off of. And so this person was like, yo, I just can't help but to draw this face and these. So I just wanted to be very clear again that you have to kind of be blind really not to see what's going on, but the mind is blind. So it doesn't see what's going on. This is exactly why, folks, we could carry on. Like we could have this knowledge and we could know that we could get to the next stage with this and still not do it. This is what I'm most concerned about right now with all of us, because the longer that we're in this crazy box, right, with all this stupidity going on, they want to keep something going on, disturbance all the time. They want to bring this stuff around on full moon. They want to just keep your cage rattled, and it's just keeping your mind constantly trying to feel the future and feel what's going to happen. And then in that craze, you're not putting any attention and time into the spirit. And then this is the crescendo right here that I got to explain. We talked about, so if you don't have the great parents, you go through your life, the knowledge really never makes it to your doorstep. You get older and older. We have this idea also that as long as I'm healthy, when I get older, that's fine. As long as I'm healthy. But what we have to really push ourselves to is making sure that we can keep growing our spirit. Because as you're growing your spirit, see your body, and this is the natural process. That's why you see these yogis, they're getting old, they die. However, they're already being liberated as they're getting older, because see, this is what happens. So the body starts getting more frail, but the spirit is fully developed. Okay? And every time the body goes to sleep, the spirit is easy for it to fly off. So the person that is working with these principles of building their spirit already start experiencing afterlife as their body is starting to get further and further into the process of just getting ready to transmute. So they said that with Yukta Soiree, this is something that Andrew told me today, that when he departed from the space, which he told him he was about to do, which he told him, hey, I'm on my way out, the body never decayed. It kept growing. It was growing hair. It was growing nails, and the skin was not decaying. So they took the body to California, and they put the body in the Yoga Institute, because like I said, all of those people that you're seeing that still, they're going to have to do some things too. Because based on what was written in the book, Yukta Soiree and Yogananda told these people that they needed to take this knowledge and that they needed to make sure that it got to all of the children of the people that they were also responsible for. So they had these other disciples. And these disciples also have a lot to do with even the melanin dominant inside the United States and other places. That basically the gesture was to give this knowledge to the Europeans to make sure that they were able to still deliver it to the new races that were going to be coming into the planet. And that's why they set up all of these yoga institutes and all this kind of stuff. And then it all got gatekeeped, just where gatekeepers are there. And then they're practicing this traditional yoga. And there hasn't been an elaboration on the Bhagavad Gita since Yogananda passed on. And there's only one guy, which was a disciple of Yogananda, who came back around and kind of tried to give a breakdown of what was being mentioned in the book. And he was just very traditional. It definitely is not 2021 style. So someone has the duty, and I'm taking upon that duty at least once, to go through the Gitas and bring it back in 2021 vernacular so that the spiritual aspirants of this time can actually understand what is really needed for the ascension process. Now, we spent the last decade already elaborating on things that we're showing you, like the superior brachium, the body, and all the different things. Let me fix my lighting real quick here. I'm over here getting like I'm an Oompa Loompa in this. They got the Kelvin high on this thing. I'm like, damn, I'm going to get purple in here in a minute. Hold on real quick. Like, man, okay. I guess that's just how I am. I'm hot right now. I'm like, man, I'm on fire. Anyway, let me see if I can back this down just a little bit. Is the light just bright? Okay, there we go. All right. Give me a minute, everyone. It's funny, like, this is definitely not the technology moon. You know how when just like the moon just is like, look at that. Oompa, loompa, loompa dee doo. Hold on real quick. I had to give it a moment, man, because sometimes this stuff gets so deep, man. Like, yo, I need to come up for air, yo. Okay. Whew. All right, here we go. So I guess that's good enough, man. Man, I can only say for sure for all the beautiful beings that are here, man, I do this, man, every day, man. I've been like so reinvigorated about just the whole thing, man. I hit rock bottom the other day, man. I was like, man, I'm definitely in humility. And they were like, man, it's time to make the climb. And I was like, glorious. They're like, man, we're going to walk up different this time. And I was like, really? Yeah, we're going to walk up we're going to walk up the spine with this true unity and this yoga, man. And we're going to break down these Gitas one more time for humanity because they need it more than ever. And now also there's beings here such as yourself that can actually comprehend this. And that's why if you get your Kindle copy is already like $3 or something like that. And you have it tonight. And it's just like going through those stanzas and you're going to see it's like, wow, like everything that we've been discussing and talking about. And that's also why for me, it's refreshing because I had to get this knowledge from the ether. Like every day just coming in and be like, I believe based on what I've experienced, this is how it works. And then to go in the book and be like reading how it works from what I was transmitted to me. And then some extra, I'm like, oh, man, we got this. Here's 1,000 pages of extra sauce. By the time that we're done with this, it'd probably be invisible heads on the chat. They're like, yo, are they even physical anymore? It's like, man, they moved on. So let's finish this. So we talked about how, so we've seen this image again. I kind of was right in the middle of this. So it said all the astral and cerebral spinal plexus in their natural state. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about how there's still like a way that you can ascend mentally or off of a substance. But then what happens is if you still can't control the mind and you knew you couldn't control it when you got in there, it's just got more fuel for it to project this wild external reality to you, right? And that's what a lot of us see in those journeys. But if you had actually been able to really get into your meditation, still your consciousness and fuel your soul, even if you took a substance like that, you would just be into a whole nother, it would be almost like, again, you wouldn't even take it because you wouldn't want to kind of throw off your system to a certain level. Now, I'm not saying these substances don't have the benefit of at least taking you through a really quick tour of what the consciousness is capable of doing. But if you want that to be sustainable, and that's the big word here, sustainability, to be able to actually, it's not like you just took a power pellet and then for 15 minutes you're a god. And then you come back into mini-me after that, and it's like depressing. It literally is depressing. And then you're like, you can't get back into that space unless you do that again. And then you kind of develop a dependency or a fear of that. And then you start feeling like that's the only thing. Like I never got as high as I did on DMT. And then somebody starts trying to tell you about the yoga, and you're like, that ain't it, man. It's got to be something else. And it's like, well, what this is to make sure that you can sustain that, and that you can actually bring energy in to develop your centers for real. So that way, as your spirit is getting larger, but your body is getting older, your body starts passing on. It gets weak. And this is like the soul's like, okay, it's only going to be a matter of time now before we're going to be completely ejected. And it already starts making those trips. And it's really easy for it to make those trips. So do you see, if everything went balanced for you, that is the process. This is the process that we seek to catch our lives in enough time so that we can be able to enact this process. And on top of that, just at least gain an awareness, because maybe somebody is saying over there, well, I'm not done yet. Because it doesn't mean that everybody's done with this experience. We talked about today, just so you understand how to get out those doors that you came in. When you finally get done with whatever it is that you're doing, if you're still, I don't know, you still want to be on Maybelline, you know what I mean? You still want to, I don't know, you may have aspirations for this life. I'm just making sure that you know where your break glass in case of emergency is, right? So let's finish this. It goes on and it says, the externalized heart center, when identified with the senses, expresses itself as an activating impulse of emotional likes and dislikes, attachments and aversions, rather than a pure, unprejudiced feeling of life force control. You see the difference? So it's saying, yeah, you could reach this externalized heart center thing. And I see a lot of this in the conscious community now. It's like, yeah, I love everybody. Oh, I love, and I got to love. And then it's like, but there's these things you don't love. And this is done in more of an intense way because the energy sensors are heightened, but they're still pouring out into the manas. So it's like, a lot of dislikes and attachments. And I got aversions. Look and see, the aversion thing is like, I'm trying to avoid something. It's like, man, we got to run on the battle head on. You just need enough strength to defeat what's on the battle. But for us to try to catch the gutter over here, it doesn't mean that we actually are eliminating the problem. And how that's broken down also is about how I have it going on, you have it going on, we all have it going on. There's things that we think about doing that we wouldn't actually do in the actually act out. Okay? There's things that we've disciplined ourselves in certain ways, and so we won't act those things out, but they're still in the mind sometimes. And what they or a lot maybe, and what they mention is that what the master, the yogi, or the guru is always trying to do is trying to kill the seed in the mind of it. Because they know that in the right circumstances, with this energy still being allowed to stay in the mind, even if it's not acting out in the physical, it's looking for this opportunity, and it's going to break the shore. It's going to break the shore of the barrier that the mind and the body, basically from you actually doing it, is there. So this is like, if you think in your mind like, man, I just got to give us some baddies, man. And then you're like, but you wouldn't really do it, right? Eventually, though, it's going to try to keep creating scenarios and circumstances where you can. And then it will put you into a situation, and then because the thought was allowed to live, it will attack then, and it will win. And you will find yourself doing something in the external physical reality that you had thus confined only into your mind and tried to keep it contained there. Now, again, I don't want anyone here to start going in on themselves like you're supposed to be Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect over here, and there's supposed to be none of these ideas, because they even mentioned, surely, though, the person who is keeping that contained is far more better than the one who is not controlling it at all. But it is a note to self that if there's still some wild things running around there, you want to search for the root and eliminate the root just to clear up the space of what's going on in the consciousness. So you're working then to catch this curve, right? This is where this perfect trajectory is happening. You want to develop the spirit body at a certain point, so that way when the physical body starts making that curve and starts its decay, the spiritual body is on the rise. And the strength of the spiritual body being being already refined is now not in a direct competition with the body, but ready to succeed the body. This is the metamorphosis. As this process is taking place, you're not like sitting there old and not like stuck and brittle. You're actually feeling more and more and experiencing more and more of the liberation. Right? And this is getting the timing right of how to die, if you may, how to get ready to go through the ascension process, right? And this is why the breathing, again, is important. Like, I don't want to put everyone into the bag of having to stand on their head in order to make this work for you. I will say, though, that if you're in that kind of condition and you can push yourself, you will learn that eventually you'll flip over this whole thing, like consciousness and doing the right thing and all this kind of stuff and helping yourself and all that will seem like a struggle for a while. And then all of a sudden you'll start, only way I can put it, you'll start getting aggressive with it. It's because you'll start seeing benefits and you'll be like, yo, shoot, let's go harder into this yoga. So then what happens is when you start going harder into yoga, instead of like treating the yoga like, and this is the external yoga, like it's a gym class and you're just waiting for it to be over. You ever been in gym class and you're like, you know, the instructor is just hardcore and you're just in there just gassed out and you're like, man, when is this going to be over? And they doing burpees next. And you just feel like it's just not, you're just not catching up. And then you go again and this keeps happening, right? So there's this point where you power through. So it's like you're no longer doing the yoga just to finish the session. It's like you're doing it to burn. Because you know you're burning the karma and you're transmuting the energy into the cosmos. So those who practice yoga that way, the Shavasana is way more stronger. So even when people are in a group and they've gone through a sessions and their minds are actually tuned in, when they go into Shavasana, it makes a field of this energy. And then other gurus, masters, and ancient teachers are able to manifest in that field, intelligences, and then inspire the ones that are there in the Shavasana with visions, feelings, senses of the Supreme. I'm just telling you what's going on behind the scenes, because when I tell you, if you go try to find someone doing this, it will be very difficult. So this is what can give you the impression that maybe it doesn't work. If it did, everybody will be doing it, and here you go. And I told you before, if 9 billion people are not even choosing to go into consciousness, where would you see these people at? Per capita, there's not enough of them for you to have a strong example that this is possible. And the great part of this experience is somehow you're getting the knowledge. It works. They even have it a step by step to basically talk you down off of a suicide mission with the manas where you're going to kill yourself into a whole nother reward of being able to grow your spirit to maximum benefit. And remember, you've already done a lot here already. This is one thing that I want to make sure that I tell you. Remember, I'm 43, man. We went in. There will never be a party like some of the parties that I've been to. It's just not going to happen again. Some of y'all was in when music was really music. Remember that? There's never going to be any songs like that anymore. So what I'm saying is that you've already really got your feel. Why not go on to something else? And for those who are not thinking about doing this now, just remember what I said. Once you get your feel of all of this, and then you know whatever you're looking to accomplish, you still need to get done. Like all these things, once you finally are done, don't forget this. Because this is what's going to save your ass. It's like real talk. Like, I know how life is. Like the moment this whole thing turns off, there's going to be another impulse. The manas are going to run wild. They're like black stallions. We're going to get into this deeper and deeper and show you how like they're like real manes. These are not like, these thoughts you have are not just like weak thoughts. They're very strong and they have a lot of power and they've been running for a while. Like I said, and then King Ego is, he's riding through. King Soul, they got the foot of the horse on his face. There's no intentions to get you into a space where you're going to be able to wax strong in your spiritual abilities and to realize the power. That's what's happening on this plane, and that's what makes it a challenge. That's why it wasn't like, that's why you see the 9 billion. It's to show you like it's dead bodies all on the battlefield. That's basically what you're looking at. This is a spiritual battlefield, and it's nothing but bodies all over the place from beings who've lost the war with themselves. Right? And so now it's your turn. Because everybody has their own field. So let's finish this off here. So you're catching the curve. So yoga means the union. It's not just about the physical yoga alone, because we watch folks do the physical yoga as we watch folks take the DMT and it still doesn't work for them. It's about the actual meaning of the yoga, which is unity. However, the physical yoga is if you want to say easy because it is a path that works. And I tried to leave an analogy for this today. I don't know if it was a really good one, but this analogy was just about that. Let's say you're in the jungle and you're trying to get to the canopy, which is the top of the jungle, and there's these ropes hanging down. You go up one rope, you get up a little bit, and you realize that it doesn't lead to the top of the canopy. Another one, the same thing happens. Another one, a little bit higher, but the same thing. Finally, you find one, and it goes all the way to the top. What that really would be in this context is something that has been around for thousands of years that has been tried and tried and tried, and somebody then took notes. So these folks were already there. Our ancestors were already there, already knowing in such a complicated thing like ascension from a physical plane, they figured it out. And then they put the yoga there, the physical yoga, because they were like, so pound for pound, out of all of the different things that may lead you, all these different ropes that may lead you to the top of the canopy, this one is the most refined because it was that many masters that were working on it. That many ancestors that had really been testing this form of consciousness to see if it was going to produce results. So we now have this opportunity. In conclusion, in the face of what the world is presenting right now, it's just ridiculous. Like when you see this whole thing with the Robin Hood and the Wall Street and all of that, and then now, like I said, they've basically hacked Wall Street. And even there's a lot of support for these kind of things. CoinMarketCap put number 0 up there and then put the thread from Reddit that is giving all the tips to everything that is going to be mooning the moment they give the tip. So if they say, GMC, put your money there and hold, 6 million people are in this group. This amount of people are going to go right away and invest in something. And it's going to just drive the value of that really high. That cannot go on. In the stock market and how they play that game, they're up right now. If it wasn't already orchestrated by them, they're already ready to implement the next phase of making sure that kind of thing gets mitigated really fast. And all that equals, yesterday, Elon Musk said Bitcoin on his Twitter, and it went up from 30 all the way to 38,000 and then back down to 34. So when a person can say things, millions of dollars or billions of dollars are lost or won, this is shaky territory for this financial situation we're in. So do you think that you want to be sitting there worried about this shit all the time? This is what I'm telling you to tell yourself. So maybe this life works out. Do you want to come back here for another round of this? Who are they going to have as president then? You see what I'm getting at here? It's like, this is what I'm telling myself. It sounds great to me at 43. I'm sure this is like, man, I may hang up on you at 23. Nah. It's Bugattis, baby. But at this stage, I'm like, yo, I've already seen everything. Like, really? I've seen and experienced everything. High levels of energetics, a body running completely on even metals, super deformed nuclear hybrids, monatomics. All of those different aspects, up on stage, talking to famous people, in jail. All of it, just like, so at a certain phase, you got to be like, okay, I need to get in control of this. You got to be able to talk yourself into this experience, because a lot of times you could just be sitting there fighting this like, I want to get it. I'll do it when it's time to, or it can't be that serious. It shouldn't be that hard for me to do. I don't know if I need to do it that way. You'll have all this thoughts. And what I'm telling you is, man, time is strange right now. These are strange times. What I would do, if you ever took my advice for anything, I would take some time and figure out how to do this, how to feed your spirit, how to feed your soul. I would master it. And then if there was time to come back to the world, I would do that then. Just to make sure that I had the method down and it was working before I spent time on anything else. I want you to understand this. I'm not trying to put a dogma on you and like you got to now go and you just need to go and be religious. That's not what I'm telling you about. I'm saying this is a real craft. You got a book, 500 pages. At the top, it's 1,000. That means if you read 2 volumes, it's 1,000 pages. There is nothing outside of the scope of consciousness that is not written, that can be conceived by the mind, that is not written in that book. I'm going to go through this book with everybody in this group. I'm going to condense and blow out anything that is necessary to do so. But also for your own personal quest, I will grab it. And I will use it in this time like a shield against misfortune. Because that, from everything that I've discovered, because I've been practicing a lot of these principles already, now I see something written. So when somebody says, hey, Sevens, so would you recommend a book that I should read that can help me? This one. Other times I would be like, nah, because shoot, there's some weird stuff going on. Some of these authors be on some demonic or some weird stuff. And so you read half of the book or parts of the book is great, but other parts are drawing you into something that is definitely not, is counterproductive towards your growth. Also, when you're reading this book, there's a mention of God. God. I would put supreme there to, keep the codes and the triggers around God in place. The supreme. There's mentions of the Jesus. You can see how the manipulators of which are the editors, they want to bring the Christ myth alive so bad. They're willing to use someone else's knowledge, some other culture's knowledge to bring across this Christ myth. So the main thing when you see that is just Christ consciousness. And so as long as you put supreme where God is and Christ consciousness where Christ is, man, that thing is going to unfold for you in a very special way. And where one stanza, this is what we were seeing, one stanza, once you start getting into the book, holds all of the knowledge in that one effort. In that one stanza, that if you just follow what is there, you will be feeding the soul and feeding the spirit to a level of where it can get itself into higher consciousness. So I'm going to take a time and I'm going to answer a couple questions until, because we haven't been able to get to some of the questions because I've been seeing them. And then what I've done is I've condensed the question rather than asking the question. I've condensed it into the message. So I'm going to go ahead and if you're here and you have a question about anything that was presented, then we can answer those questions. Next week, we're going to be coming in. We're actually starting filming of Enealogy Yoga next week. So you will be getting some real-time info, some tidbits until it's complete. And again, this is our effort to bring now, because we've done a lot with the mind and the spirit, to bring it now into the body and to get the body strong. Because even for me right now, in doing a week and a half, I think I'm somewhere in there, consistent yoga, I feel like I punched through a wall at this stage. Like just the level of the breathing and then that in conjunction with the mindset, like knowing what I'm dealing with, seeing the world run out of gas and about ready to let everybody down. This is almost like mandatory to have something like this in your possession, so that way you can get yourself together and actually be able to withstand what is to come. So, Sean, do you want to go ahead and regulate those raised hands? If you do have any questions tonight, brother, you can raise your hand. Wholeness family. Beautiful transmission, my brother. All right, Ed Wizard, my brother, Wholeness.
Hey, Wholeness brothers, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for that awesome transmission, Sevan. I got 2 questions. First question, when you had showed us the Bhagavad Gita, is that just the general Bhagavad Gita, or is there like different, like, is there other versions of the Bhagavad Gita? You know what I'm trying to say, that that dial in on it specifically what you want us to pick up on? Or because I have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita and I just want to make sure that I have the right one, or if I need to go out and get these other 2. And the second question was with the Raja.
Let me answer that one first. That way because my mind these days, I've been that way I give you the best answer. To answer that question, okay, so this is how I ended up not paying as much attention to the Gitas 6 or 7 years ago, because I had this copy of the Gitas that was a translation by another cat. There's a lot of translations because this book was in Sanskrit, and so it had to have a translation to come into the English world. And so when I read that one, oh man, I was asleep. Like, I mean, it was really boring. Like, it was like, and it was also like they were trying to preserve a lot of the Sanskrit. So they were just saying the Sanskrit words in place of breaking down the real concept of the word to try to get you to understand what's being said. So absolutely, this version of the Bhagavad Gita, which is mentioned even in the foreword, that some are more poetic, some versions are more poetic. They try to lean towards the spiritual aesthetic more. So there's different ones, but this one is about ascension. This one is about actually the condensed versions of what the language is revealing coming back into English in a method of where you would understand as an advanced metaphysician. See, like, this is metaphysical terms. It even increases your vernacular and your overall lexicon of the awareness of what is the difference between certain energies, like vidya. That's clear, real clear sight and vision about what's going on. So you see everybody has a perspective and they're seeing parts of the truth, but are they seeing vidya, which is like the real, the unadulterated, the clear, the one that is the actual. So in English, we don't have differentiations like that in our spiritual teachings. It's either you see or you don't. But what's mentioned here is which is very important, is how you can partially see. And that's how you can catch the mind, because you can see that the mind does have a way to bring a quasi spirituality over the consciousness. But it has a limit to what it can really achieve. And you start being able to see those limits very clearly. And then you realize, man, I need to head back in the other direction. The mind's external venture into trying to actually come into consciousness that way, it won't make it completely on the journey. And then you're able to bring things back in. So go ahead with that last question about the Raja I heard you mention.
Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute. Okay. Right. And thank you for that, brother. My second question is with the Raja Yoga. I briefly looked that up and it looks like it's like a whole system. So it's not just the physical exercising aspect of what we typically know of as yoga on the surface. It's something that's more. Can you dive into that a little bit, or do you already have that?
Absolutely. So what's basically being offered here is royal knowledge. So I know some are always looking for the best, right? Like we all want to be royalty and treat it like royalty, right? This is royal knowledge. So what's being transmitted in this version of the Gitas that I was explaining to you about, the one that I left the link for, is the royal knowledge. So it's not even just the actual positions of actual physical yoga, but actually how the consciousness needs to think and needs to perceive and to come into union with the spirit in order to reach the highest state. So the highest state then is the Raja, because it is saying it's set aside for the highest citizens, if you may, of the reality. So think about how this is being presented, because it's literally saying, listen, if you want to be royalty, here's the knowledge for that. And the real one, though, this is not like a decoration that you get that falls off when you die. This is the one that carries you beyond death, that allows you to gain the respect as you're walking into your greater aspects of yourself. And your perceptions start here. I'm not a fan at all of systems that you got to experience in the hereafter. And you're like sitting here bored as hell all day because you're trying to practice something and keep yourself in restraint, but you see none of the benefits of this. That's Christianity, basically. So this is not what this is. This is that you start rapidly gaining a spiritual connection with yourself through isolating certain things that you're still doing, just from lack of not having that level of a mentor or that level of a reiteration of how it exactly works, like how detrimental it could be sometimes for you to kind of live out a certain way. So you're really looking for the Raja Yoga anyway to expand beyond this thing and get to a whole nother stage. It would be a shame if you didn't get there because of the application method that you were using wasn't exact. And this is really where I'm getting at with this conversation today, is that I've seen a lot of stuff, and you just don't get to the top of the canopy. You may get pretty far. And me and you, we've been in this for 10, come on, this is 10 years. So you definitely know what I'm talking about. It's like you could get into a system and even wholeheartedly dedicate yourself to it, and then still be like, it leaves you still in that same void. That's not what this is. Clearly. This, for us especially, it weaves in a lot of the stuff that we knew intuitively, but with the extra of someone who's also traversed those planes. See, because what's happening here is that we can still say that even in some of our greatest meditations, in our greatest levels of connection with the spiritual self, that may have lasted for maybe tops an hour. Sometimes if you go on a journey, it could be a few hours. We're talking about beings that have been sitting on these planes for days and days with a trained consciousness to then come back to you and say, this is exactly what you need to do. Not all the extra stuff, because if we put too many burdens on you, you're going to feel like that this is not going to liberate you. It's going to possess you then. It's going to be like a religion to you, and you're going to feel like that you want to go do something else, but you're really doing this. This is a formula of how you actually really convince the ego that, buddy, what are you doing, man? You're wrecking it for us. So you no longer really let the ego keep talking for you, because the ego is always going to be looking at how less pleasure it's going to get. It's like, well, shoot, I'm sure this says that I cannot have a bunch of girlfriends. I'm sure that's what's in this book. And if it's that again, there's got to be another way. So it's almost like the ego is always just trying to it's trying not to work, but meanwhile, it's always working. The mind is always working, right? So the only time you could ever get off work is if you could actually stop the mind. But the mind thinks that it's going to keep working, and it's going to eventually create something that's going to stop or end all of the stuff. And it's like, that's how the mind starts to sell this idea that it can't really back up because it's not the spirit. And so that's the power of this, is that like we get this opportunity to practice this Raja Yoga, which is actually the total unity in itself. That's why, as it says here, let's just read it directly. Because now that's what I'm saying in the terminology. That's why I even start picking up on some of these Sanskrit terms. In the terminology, yoga means to the Westerner the class with the mat, right? But in the word itself, look, even now, look, when the Oxford Languages starts to define it, it says It's a Hindu spiritual aesthetic discipline, a part of which including breath control, simple meditation, and the adaptation of specific body postures is widely practiced for health and relaxation. Wrong. Wrong, but that's the one that you're going to get. Now, the funny part is also with my Googles, because on my other computer, when I use the Brave browser and I search, I seem to get the answers. That's how I got the Abdullah Amlagada and all that. But now I'm logged in into my joint and I go to yoga, and the first definition they give me is this physical aspect of what yoga is, right? So I just have to type here yoga union maybe in definition so I can get the okay. Oh, here we are. Yoga is a Sanskrit word that comes from the root yuj, or which we would call yog, which means to join together. Simply put, yoga means union. In many ways, the term yoga is similar to the English term communion. Now, does that actually say it has to do with the physical aspect of being on the mat? No. The physical aspect of being in the mat is another conduit or a way to produce yug. So it says it refers to the state of the union of the communion with God or one's true self or the higher power. Because in the Shavasana, like generally not in the yoga, I'm sure there's some yogis that get it through the yoga that are very advanced. But generally for the beginner, it happens during the Shavasana. The body is completely burned up and it lays there like it's already on the fire. And then the essence is now pouring out of the being and it's in union with the cosmos. And then there's these subtle. So what you literally have to do is just like the workout. If you're not in grind time and you're not sweating, buddy, you're not doing anything at the gym, right? We know this. So the yoga in this respect is the same thing where we know we're coming in for grind time. We know we're coming in to work, but this is the last time we work and we get paid. And of course, the body's going to feel like it's suffering for a while and all of what its laziness can cook up, because a lazy person takes a long time getting to the supreme. I'll say this again. A lazy being takes a long time getting to the supreme. Because the supreme is moving on a high vibratory frequency. So a lazy person the distance between them and the supreme is increasing rapidly. So you have to get on your horse. Like that's what I felt like, because your horse is your body, right? So as you start strengthening, like when I went through the first 3 days of yoga, every muscle hurt. All the muscles in the back. All of them. And when I'm on workouts, you may get the hamstring, you get the delts, you get the wings, you get the muscles. So you get these little 1 or 2, 3 parts, 4 parts of the body sore. This is all of it. And when all of it is exercised, that's what's actually making so you're going into those crevices and you're cooking up the fat juice again. Right? And that's why yoga heals things. I asked for healing from my headaches. Remember, I kept telling you I was getting these headaches, especially during the full moon. It's full moon right now. I'm good. As long as I get off here in 45 minutes, because I've been going all day, but I'm just saying. It's been moving things. I had when I started eating, we talked about the problem with the diet and then how the diet started really messing up my joints and all that. And then I was really kind of concerned about my knees for a moment, because it seems like the knees kind of took the biggest hit from not having the replenishment of the proteins that are needed for the body and et cetera, having a good diet. Yoga knocked all that stuff out. Yoga didn't care about all that stuff. It's building other parts of the body that are supposed to support those parts of the body. So it's just it's something different. But see, remember, yoga in the yoga class, and that's why the royal yoga starts in the consciousness. That's why I feel like it's a need for this type of mentorship, because when I see a yoga video, I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's just boring to me. I'm just keeping it real. So I'm looking at it because they do it also in a very robotic way, in a mechanical way. That's why I was saying it doesn't mean that everybody that is doing yoga has cracked into Atma and understands the battlefield Gitas. They probably haven't even read all that stuff. So I've had the opportunity in this segment to really be with Andrew and actually see the practice, which he's already been putting to work for years of his life. And then also to hear the knowledge coming from these volumes of work, and it's coming on into a consciousness that can really understand what's being said. And so it's a perfect match then. And it's also meeting me at a time in my life where I'm like, well, shoot, I done pretty much seen it all. At this stage, I need to start preparing for the ascension process, especially since if nobody's even going to know who you are or learn who you are and not even respect you, you're wasting time in those kind of sanctums. So do you see, it's like when life, and that's why I said to everyone here, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're ready to do this now. This conversation could be for you just so that you're aware there is a way out. That trap doors that you don't know where the thing is at, it's in your body. And when you move certain ways, because now instead of you practicing it, like I said, like it's a workout class, you're really trying to basically make this thing work. So when you're doing the certain moves or positions where you're supposed to be bending, and you'll watch the body, like the thing is like the whole thing is wild because you'll watch the body is cheesing out. It's like it doesn't even want to bend through the whole stretch. Like it's up to the instructor, right? It's like, okay, it's the instructors, they're supposed to teach me yoga. And it's like, what are you talking about? You need to get this down as soon as possible so you can get yourself together. Come back into your body and stretch into this position to open up that area, because down deep in that area that you haven't opened is essence. Is something that is so lying so dormant that it's basically corroding, and you now need to exercise it and transmute it. And this is a way that you're actually doing that. So I trust that this makes sense. And then, like I said, we're going to cover it, gain the gems and jewels from it. But as we're going through the experience, since you have the work, this is not somebody coming and saying, hey, I got this secret. It's not anywhere I'm going to tell you. You have the work, so you'll be able to bear witness for yourself at your own stage of expertise and awareness and knowledge, and be like, pound for pound, no, because we've read some pretty wild stuff. G.H. Rees, the Bibliotheca Pleiades, so there's some juicy, the Code to the Matrix. There's some really, really interesting works. However, at this point in this, when we're seeing the condition of the reality that we're actually living in, and you're in here, like I'm here with you. You see what I mean? I need to be able to understand what my trajectory is going to be beyond this, because if I'm just thinking over here that this is going to get better, it looks like to me it's going to get a little worse before it gets better, because the core fundamentals to what needs to be changed are not even being addressed. Right? So that kind of spells it out for me. So I need to gird myself up. And that's what this is about. It's about being on the battlefield. It's about actually putting your body, you're in the condition to where you're going to be able to win this war. And if we don't think it's a war, we should just look at that from a biological standpoint, right? And like your body catching a cold or something like that, and how there's a conflict there. And this is the resolution to those conflicts. So I trust that makes sense. It's obviously a bit passionate at this stage, for me to make sure I transmit, in order of exactly why this could be and will be a big time game changer for a lot of beings that have been on the path. Do we have any final questions from the quest?
Like Eddie had his hand up, but he took it down. What's up, buddy? Did you want to say one more thing?
All right.
Yeah, brother. I just wanted to say, man, that you're most definitely respected and loved, and I really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, Sevan. I love you, bro. I love everyone here. Wholeness Tribe, I love being here. So thank you, brother. Thank you. Giving thanks.
I really want to tell the family, like, man, the reason why I came in here today with this and I agreed to make this this climb is because I know for sure we need to have this somewhere on wax. Like someone has to do I guess they call it a rendition. This needs to be examined again. I have a lot of consciousness power. I've read a lot of different kind of works. Like I've even seen completely fringe works, radionics, cymatics, all sorts of stuff. And you know when you're dealing with the divine, like you know when you're dealing with a message that comes from beyond this space that's accurate. Because remember, everything's a blueprint anyway, though, so the person can't go off and start talking about other beings and things. And for a wise person, and that make any sense unless it's explained a certain way. But I easily see how you can take something external and start doing the external thing and then get kind of dragged off by the mind and never end up benefiting truly from what was being mentioned. I'll say in conclusion also, there's one particular part of the text, I haven't come across it yet in my build because I'm still at like chapter 3, but we read a stanza before yoga, and it was mentioning, I believe it was called the milch cow. This will be the last bill for today. Okay, so that is a real word. So it's milch cow, okay? So what was being mentioned is that the more of the graduated beings have this milch cow in their consciousness. And what this is a reference to is that it's, even if you look at the definition, milch cow, plural, milch cows, a cow kept for milking, a dairy cow, a cow that produces milk, having had at least one calf. Figuratively, a cash cow, military slang, a German World War II, whatever, right? So this milch cow, right? It breaks down how that in life, what the master is capable of attaining through this Raja Yoga or these practices is an internal milch cow, a way in which they can manifest every single thing they need or everything that they want and fulfill all their desires through the inside of themselves. Listen to what I'm saying, because this is very important, because I think that a lot of times when we see ourselves not getting as much pleasure, like the last pleasure that we have in the external, it's like, oh, you gonna take that away too? We just feel like we're going into some ward somewhere, some nunnery. And then now there's going to be no more joy. There's not going to be no more happiness, no more orgasm, nor any of that. That's not what's being said. That's not what this knowledge is about. What it's explaining is that there's a refined way of doing this that will offer you way over whatever a person could ever give you externally, because, and it makes mention of this, the external stuff that would be the same thing that the milch cow can produce internally always seems to have strings attached to it. So they're like the masters, they break it down. They tell you how, like, so you could go out and you can gain something externally and it could be pleasing for a moment, but then it always has this drawback to it. It's like, because it's an external physical thing. When if you learned about your internal ability and you just you start turning that on and realizing that, you know what? The reason why I would want to, like, again, the great feeling of Shavasana, put myself into that state and be able to activate that state for myself is because I wouldn't be dependent on anybody else bringing me into that state. And then what happens is that it doesn't mean that you're never around anyone anymore that can bring you into that state. It just, because that's the reward. The reward is to then be able to also be around beings that can bring you into that physical state externally, but you gain something beyond what most have been able to gain. And it's called, in this case, a universal love. So this means that even though that external milch cow, if you may, is now providing something to you that you like or love or enjoy, if they go away, you don't feel like you've actually lost anything. This is the key. You don't feel like she's got to be with me. You know, this is my milch cow, you know, come back to me. All of that kind of thing, that is all of that possession aspect of what we talked about in the reality. The keys to this Raja Yoga is actually teaching you how to liberate yourself so that way you can actually really enjoy those things. Because people who, if they get something, let's say you get let's say a car, right? But you're afraid of it being stolen all the time. You're not really enjoying those things. Or you get, a beautiful twin flame or whatever. not too long after, you start realizing, you're like, wow, this is incredible. I met this person. It's only going to be very short-lived. This is what they're explaining. It's going to be short-lived if you don't have your consciousness already tuned for the internal milch cow. Because right after you start thinking about how great this person is and everything, your mind is going to then say, what happens if they leave or you lose them? So it introduces this attachment right away to it. Versus in the liberated aspects of the consciousness, because you can produce this. This is how they say that basically everything in the reality that you're looking at, trees, animals, life, death, etc., that you can pull the string on if you know where the string is at inside of your consciousness. And so when we're talking about regenerating something, like you say a yogi comes in, somebody's sick, and he just regenerates the person. It's because they know how to pull the string to what is affecting that person through themselves. So if you never learn like how to play basically the instrument of yourself, you never see that the strings or the chords actually connect to all the things that are in the reality. And this is what makes the siddhas, and why people are like, oh man, what are these siddhas? Are the powers, right? The cities. We talked about inside of that was the University semester 2. We began with the siddhas, right? And we talked about all of the siddhas, infinitely small. And we talked about how those would really come into play and benefit into what you're experiencing in the spiritual realm. And so it's that. It's the realization that how this system is designed to work is that when you get tired of what you're seeing in the world every day, this is what you turn to, yourself. Think about what I'm saying. When you get tired of what you're seeing in the world every day, because that's the manas, that's all the mind, that's everybody's mind and all the stuff that they've created. It seems like common sense that once you get tired enough, you turn to yourself. So literally also for me, you turn into yourself. You turn inward because you're like, you know what, man, this ain't going to change. Here we go already again. It's just now February. Time is moving hella fast. And now they done cooked up a whole financial disaster for themselves. Trump is out of office. Now Biden's here. And here they go talk. So they're already cooking up another distraction for you. And so do we think that's going to end in 2022 or 2023? Or do we think we even want to be waiting on this? So then when you get to the point, but what is the solution? You see what I mean? So somebody say, well, shoot, that's where they at now in Clubhouse. Nobody has a solution. It's horrible to watch. A 3-hour conversation with no solution. It's like talking about this is enough. I mean, come on. And then, because the uncomfortable side to this, though, is that actually, if we did really start talking about a solution, we would figure out there was none. Except for one. And that's where all this gets really strange, because there's only one solution, and that's you. So if you don't let yourself out, you'll never get out. And I feel like that's a very serious thing, that if you don't get yourself out of this, you'll never get out, because there's no solution in the world to get you. Actually, it would be you need to get in, right? So there's no solution in the world to get out. There's no way out in the world. You got to get in. And so that's just it. So the gift here is, just to conclude here, is you have the route. That's all that's all that was here right now. It's just that's not your story anymore. You can get in on this. The word siddha means the perfected one. You can go in on the Raja Yoga, really boss up on yourself. Get your milch cow together. Start powering your own devas. Getting the lights to turn on, because when these devas are turning on, these are your own beings. Like that thing this beautiful being you're trying to fall in love with, it's one of your chakras. And you come into union with that. It's like you can't come into union with that, with all this stuff on your mind. This is like you coming in, you got somebody that you really love and care about. And then you walk in and you got all this shit on your mind. You can't connect with that person like that, right? Like, is anybody here, you just like, you got to handle the whole thing. You got to always hold things up. Then you get in with your significant other. And it's not even like y'all can really have a conversation because you got so many things that you're dealing with and so many things on your mind and so many. It's like you can't really express real love to that person that way. So that's what this is like. We got so many things going on externally, stimulus that we're dealing with right now in reality. I'm not even talking about some of our habits. I'm just talking about how they're putting us under pressure all the time. That's what I'm mainly referring to. Our habits is just trying to medicate for a situation that we don't even get a little bit of happiness. It's like, man, let me smoke a joint or something. Let me get 10 minutes of, out of body, because I'm going to have to go right back in the Terror Dome again. I'm going to go right back in the cubicle again. I'm going to have to go right back into this whole newsroom. I'm going to have to go right back into the chaos again. I'm barely coming up for air most of the time. What is the solution, man? Get me up out of this thing. So that's what I'm saying. It's an aggressive thing. You'd be like, you know what? That's it. I'm no longer waiting on the world anymore. I see now what this truly is. Nobody on earth, it wasn't really designed for people to leave. That was not even actually the point. The point here is for people to reincarnate here from the astral plane and to live out experiences over and over and over again until they finally get it. Until samsara and all the misfortunes start bleeding through their DNA to where they can get aware young enough to what happened the previous time to start cleaning up the process. And then the grace is there were masters that had decided once they accomplished it that they were going to try to make it as clear as possible, not necessarily as easy as possible, because easy is all based on you and how much you got yourself into and all those kind of integers. But the goal is, does this lead to the canopy though? That's what I'm not in alignment with, is teaching people knowledge that doesn't get them the solutions that they're looking for. My intentions is to teach exact knowledge and to know exact knowledge. So for me right now, this is exact as it gets. And if I find something else or experience something else that is even more refined, then you will be having that too. And as we go through all these processes, because there are other things that we've tapped into and that we've learned through this experience that have been very instrumental. I've always seen this knowledge as progressive because again, in karma codes, we learned about the devas from another viewpoint. And we learned about them being inside of us. Now, when you get something like the Raja Yoga, the ultimate science, when you then put that in your head along with what you've already gained with karma codes, then you're basically, like I said, you're talking down King Ego from still trying to drive you off the cliff and keep telling you that it knows what you want and knows what you're going to get and knows what you need. And it never delivers on that. That's what I was saying about the mind. The mind doesn't deliver. It knows how to think about what it wants and to convince you what you want, but it never delivers. The delivery comes from you being able to actually tap into finally the unification of who you are. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to repeat myself over and over again. We're going to keep building on this. I believe also I may bring this segment, parts of it, to YouTube, because the frequency has to be a little bit higher because this is a 500 and something page book, meaning that I would need to, I'm doing yoga every day at this point, the physical one, right? And so I'm up every morning and I'm doing that. And because Andrew is a couple houses over right now, definitely taking advantage of the possibility of us continuing this process. Also, we decided to do Enealogy yoga since there was already a planetary yoga that we can match the planetary systems to the enealogy aspects of things. Then what we plan to do is basically the what we would call the word starts with a D. It basically means the debilities. Yes, the debilities of each path. It's not so much that you would say, oh, I'm a number 4, so this is the yoga class I need to work on. It's when I'm starting to experience the debilities of a number 4, this is the yoga that I need to do in order to start working with that. So if you got like the number 3, they got the wet hands. or there's different debilities that we've isolated within each chakra. So when you're experiencing certain things that are in that arena, you're able to go immediately to that physical process of working that out. And then, like I said, you become strong. And then you also become physically and spiritually fortified. And then because of this alignments that are already the film, like our brother Sevan was saying earlier, the veil is really thin right now. So what may have been difficult for you to even tap into is now sitting right on a silver platter for you, like here. This is the highest level of the knowledge from your ancestors in the clearest aspect of you being able to get it right now in 2021. What else do you want? And at the end of the day, I always have to say, man, we give thanks, because I'm not sure what the world has been going through for the last thousands and thousands of years, because I wasn't here. I just know it seems to be kind of tough to come across actual knowledge these days that is going to be instrumental to your growth. So that being open alone is enough for me to say that we've at least been able to accomplish getting it to those who I feel like it would be most useful for. So wholeness and balanced vibrations. Again, tribe, thank you so much for coming into the space. We're going to be ramping this up. Like, I'm very serious about this. I kind of got, again, I would say turned on in one way, but kind of turned off by the world today. I'm just, I can't keep seeing this. It's like Groundhog's Day, and I'm a real person just like you. So it's like, I mean, I just know what I know. I've been through a lot. I've read a lot of things, and I've seen different levels of power. And I also see, man, like, we need some really, really exact, potent stuff, because it's not a lot of us. If it was a lot of us and we were just all doing like surface level spirituality, we'd be good. But with so many people lost, we need some beings to hit master level. And that's why also, like, when I look at Swami Yukteswar, man, I see him like a father or something. Like, you just, in the archetypical level. And it's like you don't see none of these kind of guys out anymore that are, really, really bringing it. I mean, like, bringing it, like dedicating their whole life to just this, to make sure others can have that portal open. And I see that the tribe has such a high value. Like, the valuation, the soul valuation here is so high. This is why we always have to make sure we deliver, because it's gathered very unique souls into a single space. And it's opened up a sanctum to where we can talk about these kind of things, and it's not seeming like, one thing or another. We're trying to, do too much or pour too much on it. It's like, we're just doing this because we know we all got to get ready to make some big decisions about how our existence is going to be put together and what we really going to be doing in infinity. And that's what we got. So wholeness and balanced vibrations, tribe.
Let's close out with a couple breaths, brother.
Let's do it then. Do your breath then. I'm always in with the breaths.
All right, let's do 4 or 5 breaths, family. All right. You're going to breathe in. Hold it. Release. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. One more. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Give thanks, family.
If you're out there and you want to leave that grand crescendo wholeness, it's on you. Wholeness tribe.
So open up the mics.
Wholeness.
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 Wholeness. Thank you. Thank you, family.
Thank you so much for everything.
Wholeness.
Awesome. Wholeness.
Wholeness. Wholeness.
Awesome.
Wholeness tribe.
Wholeness, everybody.
Wholeness tribe.
Wholeness family.
Wholeness family.
Love, love,
We give thanks. Wholeness.
Oh, thanks, brother. Wholeness.
Y'all are so
Wholeness,
beautiful.
everyone.
Bonus. Bonus.
Wholeness.